Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this virtual workshop meeting regarding the 2020 achievements, the 2020 draft strategic plan, and the staff priorities for 2021 to order. For the record, my name is Bill Edgar, and I'm president of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everyone for logging in or phoning in today. It looks like we have a nice crowd for it. I appreciate your taking the time to do this. This teleconference meeting constitutes the board's workshop meeting for the month of December 2020. For those who've read the agenda already and are attended this meeting, you're well aware of the list of instructions that are on the agenda that may help you if you're having a problem accessing the webcast platform. If you continue to have problems, please get a hold of Ryan Jones or Leslie Gallagher by text or by email, and they'll be able to help you access the site. Now, regarding the meeting itself, I think we've run these meetings before, and the way we've done it has been generally good, so I'm going to proceed with that. That is...
All right. Have a good day, honey.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
As before, Ryan Jones will be moderating these proceedings from a technical point of view and will operate the slides for today's presenters. He, as well as Leslie and Mike and other staff people, will field comments and questions addressed to the presenters and from texts or emails that they send in. Or if you feel comfortable, you can use the chat function, which is also available. Second, you'll notice that there are two substantive items on the agenda this morning. One is item 4A, which is the staff presentation regarding the agency's achievements for 2020. And item 4B is the staff presentation for the draft 2020 strategic plan and the staff priorities for 2021. Leslie will be acting as the ringmaster for the various staff presentations regarding item 4A, and Michael Wright will be leading the discussion relating to 4B, the strategic plan and the 2021 staff priorities. I have discussed this strategic plan and the staff priorities with the staff, as well as Vice President Dolan has also done that. And we have some comments on how to handle this, which I'll make at the time that item comes up. We obviously won't be reading every specific item that's in the strategic plan, but we need to somehow get the board priorities established so that we can finish it up, the staff can finish it up and present it at a later date to the full board. So what we're looking for today in the strategic plan item is a kind of a overall sense of whether the major priorities of the board have been addressed, whether there's some things that are missing, gaps in the plan, or whether you're satisfied and we can just wordsmith it and finish it up. So that's kind of what we're looking for today. If we get those, then we can refer to the staff and finish it up. Okay, after we've completed the questions and comments from the board, we'll ask the staff to open up the meeting for the public, and we'll take those items, and then the matter will, after the comments have been addressed, we'll bring the matter back to the board for comments and action. You should be aware that the meeting is being recorded and will be housed in the website just as our streaming video has been for all of our meetings. We'll be taking breaks along the way as appropriate, and as we always do, Ryan will place a sign that will appear on the screen during the break, indicating the estimated time that the board will return to the meeting. So I'm still under item 1 on the agenda, introductions and announcements. Leslie, do you have any other introductions or announcements you want to make at this time?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, members, we're on item 2, and Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, please call the roll to determine whether we have a quorum to conduct our business under the Water Code section 8560.
Thank you, President Edgar. Board Member Griego.
Here.
Board Member Johnson.
Here. Good morning, everybody.
Board Member Ramirez. Oh, Board Member Ramirez is running a little late. Board Member Valines is absent.
Here.
Apologize. Board Member Countryman.
Present. Good morning.
Vice President Dolan.
I'm here. Good morning, you all.
And President Edgar.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, members, we're under on item 3, public comments not on the agenda. If anyone in the audience has any comments regarding an item not on the agenda, this is the time that you may address the board, and we'll try to receive your comments. Ryan or Leslie, do you see anybody wanting to address the board on a matter not on the agenda?
I have nothing here, Mr. President.
I see nothing, but this would be a good time to mention that anyone who's calling in, I'm not sure how many people we have calling in, but it's *6 to unmute yourself and *3 to raise your hand so we can see that you have a request to speak.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Members, we're on item 4, the 2020 achievements and the 2020 draft strategic plan and staff priorities for 2020. Item 4A, as I stated before, I'm going to turn this meeting over to Leslie, and she'll facilitate today's staff presentations under this item. Leslie?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to give Ryan a moment to pull up our PowerPoint. And I'll just start by reminding our new board members, you haven't seen this before. So if anything is unclear to you, please let us know. The other board members have seen this several times. I started doing this wrap up about 4 or 5 years ago as a way to help both wrap up the year and set the tone for the next year. This is normally my favorite workshop because staff is able to showcase the work that we've done in the past year to fulfill our mission and advance the goals of the state and the board. I miss seeing you all in person. It goes without saying that this has been a year like no other, and our staff, like the rest of the world, has had to make adjustments to our way of work and really our entire way of life. I've been thinking a lot lately about how to sum up this year, missing meetings, missing conferences, missing loved ones. I'm personally just happy to have made it through relatively unscathed. I heard the other day that Webster's word of the year is pandemic for obvious reasons, but my personal word of the year is resilience. For the Flood Board has been resilient and resolute and has banded together to help each other in ways I've never seen before, and I'm grateful. I know the feeling of these virtual meetings does not always allow for the full effects of the information, but I do want to emphasize at the start, and I'm sure you'll see by the end of all the programs, the extraordinary efforts of all the board staff who, despite the uncertainty, continued to work during this unprecedented national crisis. As we've done in years past, and for the benefit of our new board members, I'm happy to open this workshop with a presentation on the accomplishments of the board staff, implementing the priorities of the board, the Natural Resources Agency, and the Newsom administration. You did not receive a document in advance, as this information is presented throughout the year in both the EO reports and as presentations to the board. And as always, the slides will be available following this workshop. I'm going to start by discussing the executive office and board participation, followed by Darren, who will talk about our policy and legislative programs. Jeet will discuss legal updates of the year. Our administrative team has a short presentation on budget and staffing, and then our managers will discuss the accomplishments of their branches for the year. We'll wrap up with Michael Wright to discuss the staff projects and programs that we'll be focusing on in the coming year. And typically after this, Jeet and I would follow up with the board to ensure our staff work plan is in alignment with the board's priorities. However, this year, in addition, we have, as President Edgar noted, substantially updated our strategic plan, and we are looking forward to receiving comments from the board on that update. We do have a target of bringing the update to the board for adoption in the first quarter of 2021. Beginning with the board and executive office. 2020 actually started out much the same as 2019. In addition to our regulatory and property management updates, we continued implementation of the 2017 plan by focusing on how to take care of what we have. We worked with our LMAs to encourage participation in the federal PL 8499 program. We also added an inspections work group with stakeholders, which, as you will hear later, really encouraged data and platform sharing, as well as explored the permitting challenges. 2020 saw the kickoff of the SSJDD feasibility study, utilizing a rather non-traditional bottoms-up approach, asking the locals to help us design what they would support, rather than creating a program and asking them to react. As you know, we'll be wrapping up this effort in mid-2021. We also spent significant time creating and funding a new branch to work in partnership with DWR, the Army Corps, and the other signatories to the YOLO Bypass Partnership, and staff and board members put significant work into the advisory committee objectives. Early in 2020, as I was participating with the executive leadership of the agencies housed under the Natural Resources Agency, we heard from Secretary Crowfoot on the administration's top priorities for state agencies, which included efforts to build climate resiliency into state programs, encourage biodiversity and habitat, consider access to nature for all Californians, develop processes to cut green tape, and to lift up science. And just the fact that our leaders felt we had to make efforts to advance that last bullet point to our normal official priorities tells us this was already shaping up not to be a normal year. But then we hit the real detour. The global pandemic caused by the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus officially hit the US on January 24th. By March 4th, Governor Newsom had declared a state of emergency, and in the course of the next 2 weeks, issued several executive orders that you see here, including a stay-at-home order and teleworking mandates for state agencies that required our entire staff to switch from a daily in-person office to 100% teleworking. I've been reflecting a lot on those early days as I prepared for this workshop, and even though our resilience has allowed us to normalize our virtual lives, those early days were really fraught and sometimes downright terrifying. But nevertheless, the board staff met the moment, and within 19 days of that first executive order, the board staff were all working remotely. And I just want to reflect on what a Herculean task that was for our administrative staff, who bore the brunt of figuring out the logistics, fielding the many questions, responding to requests for information, and just trying to keep everyone calm and focused so we could continue doing our work. I, along with the other executives housed within the CNRA, joined the Secretary's Coronavirus Task Force, which initially met daily as we strategized how to navigate these uncharted waters. I should also point out that our March 27th board meeting noted here was the first agency meeting to go virtual. And while I feel we've come a long way since then, I also want to recognize our board clerk, Ryan Jones, who's prepared us not to just survive, but to thrive in this virtual environment. And he learned in short order the many platforms we use today. You'll recall the board also adopted Resolution 2020-03, which extended Title 23 deadlines to allow board staff to continue processing permits in as timely a manner as possible. We also sent 5% of our staff, as requested, for an extended contact tracing assignment with the California Department of Public Health and the County Health Department in Los Angeles. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that our two contact tracers did not have to be told. Each of them stepped forward with a genuine desire to help, and that has made each of them the successful and sought-after employees they are in their current assignments. I really couldn't have been more proud of the rest of our staff who understood early the magnitude of the situation and banded together to help, because it has been a hardship on the rest of us that they are gone. Finally, under the secretary and agency leadership, we were encouraged and supported to focus on employee health and wellness, and I believe that's also going to be a great asset as we move forward. Turning now to our normal operations, as you'll see now and with the future presentations, our productivity this year, despite all those challenges I just described, was similar to, and in fact, in some instances, exceeded last year's, another testament to our staff's resilience. The slide should look familiar to most of you. These are typical agreements, and although noting slightly less volume than in years past. As for our board meetings, all of our board meetings and most of our workshops remained on track throughout the year. This slide shows the venues we participated in, including the one notable live tour we managed to do to the Sacramento Weir that we co-hosted with CEQA in August. It also shows our standing committee efforts. We did have some good news this year. Board members Ramirez and Countryman were reappointed and reconfirmed, and we welcomed two new board members, Mary Jane Grego and board member Brian Johnson, who were both very good sports about doing virtual onboarding. I know that was a lot to take in, particularly without the benefit of live introductions, and I really appreciated their tolerance for the whole experience. The board also said goodbye to our good friend Clyde McDonald, board member since 2012, and you'll recall we lauded him with a resolution at last month's board meeting. My next section on board participation is usually much longer, but as with the rest of the world, opportunities for groundbreakings, ceremonial signings, and the like were greatly reduced in 2020, but we still managed to get out early in the year or participate virtually in the relevant conferences such as NAFSMA, the Waterways Conference, and the FMA conferences noted here. In what seems like a long time ago now, this is President Edgar, who spoke at the Folsom Dam raise groundbreaking, along with board member Countryman and a few staff. We watched President Edgar alongside Representatives Ami Berra, Doris Matsui, Colonel Handura, and others with their ceremonial shovels. In September, at an entirely different style small group event, President Edgar, Colonel Handura, and Chris Elias from the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency signed the project partnership agreement for the San Joaquin. Board Council Dua on the right is seen signing the local PPA at Sacramento headquarters. And just for the benefit of our newer board members, there would normally be many more such ceremonies throughout the year, and we hope at some point in 2021 we can resume more normal operations with more opportunities for broader participation. One thing the board members did manage to do this year is the tour of the Sacramento Weir and the Bright landfill were co-hosted by CEQA. And we do hope to get out twice next year to both the Sacramento and San Joaquin system, so fingers crossed we're able to do that as part of our curriculum in 2021. As noted, Darren and I were able to participate in the NAFSMA conference, and I believe this has been, Darren will have a bit more detail about all of the conferences, but as with most other things, this one went virtual. The picture on the left is actually from the 2018 conference in Santa Fe, as I think most of you know that I've been on the board of directors of NAFSMA since 2017. We also participated virtually in the Floodplain Management Association annual conference in September, the highlight of which is circled here. That was President Edgar's Award for Excellence. I just want to close my portion with some pictures I took on what was the highlight of my year, a helicopter tour of the Yolo Bypass and the Delta this summer. This was my first time seeing it from the air, and it really was awe-inspiring. These first two pictures are pictures of the Setback Levee in West Sacramento and an aerial photo of the Camus at the Bright landfill, where the board also toured. I have pictures of the Fremont Weir Fish Passage, Cash Slough, and another Yolo Bypass. And I'll just leave you with this lovely view as we transition to Darren Suen, who will give you his legislative and policy update.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Well, good morning, President Egger, Vice President Dolan, members of the board. Happy holidays and hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. Although this year has been mostly challenging, the first quarter did start off normal at least. Ryan, next slide, please. Now, my pictures are not as good as Leslie's. She has much better pictures to come into. But we began this year providing subject matter expertise to Assemblymember Cooper with the reboot of Assembly Bill 137. Just to give a quick recap, for those of the board members that are relatively new and just for sake of memory, following media reports, this board recognized the intersection of public safety and homelessness was occurring on our levee systems. Your recognition of this critical infrastructure issue was shared by the Assembly member, and he started as a gut and amend of AB 137. After failing in the Senate Appropriations Committee, began anew as AB 1958 in January. Now, COVID-19 greatly reduced the number of bills processed this last legislative session. Only bills considered urgent or COVID-related could continue through the stalled legislative process. As you may recall, this bill did have an urgency statute with it. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. The bill had broad support. It should also be noted that the working group included individuals from the City of Sacramento, the Central Valley Flood Control Association, and RD 1000 and American River Flood Control District, which are both members of the Sacramento Area Flood Control Association Board. Next slide, please, Ryan. The opposition remained relatively the same as AB 137. As you can see here, a lot of them, of course, were advocates for the homeless population. Next slide. With input from the working group, the Assembly member made amendments to reach a compromise with the opposition. These included adding intent language to explain the bill that was not intended to criminalize the homeless demographic, protecting property rights by substituting move for remove, and deleting the reference to a police officer. Next slide, please, Ryan. Going through the normal process, AB 1958 moved as an urgency bill through the Assembly with significant report. You can see here, we had nearly unanimous support in the committees, and then when it went to the floor, 74-0 out of 80. Definitely meeting the threshold for urgency statute. And whereas opposition remains similar, and after many meetings and despite many compromises on legislators' part, the bill was not heard in the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee in September. It was a last-minute call at that point. And ironically, the bill passed at that committee on consent when it was AB 137. But not to be too discouraged, the Senate committee consultant did express his belief to Assemblymember Cooper's office that there is a path to a successful passage and offered to begin conversations again this next session. Next slide, please, Ryan. Now we want to take us back to March now, where we did our first joint visit with the Department of Water Resources since the earmarks ended around 2013. The board, DWR, and the Water Commission used to go back to DC, and this was the first trip back there since that time. For us, however, for the board, it was the third time making these visits, and it was pretty evident that they were getting to know us, the Army Corps, congressional staff. They were expecting to see us and recognize us. But the result of this trip, as you can see here, we made with many, whether it's congressional staff, the Senator Feinstein, and now Vice President-elect Harris is the Assistant Secretary of the Army, the House T&I and Senate Environment and Public Works committees, and Governor Newsom's Washington, D.C. offices. We discussed the Yola Bypass Partnership in Comm study, and the result was a promising legislation in WRDA, which we hoped would pass sometime this month. Recent news about this, we got word that there's still negotiations going on, and we're hopeful that it'll pass or be attached to an omnibus appropriations bill or CR in the coming days. If it doesn't, we'll be in dire straits because the chances of it passing in this 116th Congress will be significantly reduced. That's unfortunate because any bill that's not signed by the president is going to have to start over again in the new Congress. So we're hanging on. In fact, we just received notice today that there's still negotiations and there is a slim chance. So we'll, I noticed Division Chief Jeremy Eric is on this call too, and I'm actually going to, after this, I'm going to reach out to Laura Hollander about getting a letter of support from the agency because it needs to be early next week. That's how critical its timeline is. So they'll decide no later than December 9th whether there will be an omnibus package or a CR, continuing resolution, to fund the federal government going forward. So all this is obviously just happening really quick. Next slide, please, Ryan. This year also marked greatly improved relations with the Delta Stewardship Council. After submitting our board concerns to the Delta Stewardship Council, the board staff, together with the Delta Stewardship Council and DWR staff, met regularly throughout the year. The DSC paused the rulemaking process in what I would like to think is an act of good faith. The conversations that followed ensured that separate consideration of operations and maintenance activities regarding the Delta Levee investment strategy. I think the process improved the collaboration between our three entities, and at the last DSC meeting, Council President Tatayan affirmed the possibility of future opportunities to implement programs together. Next slide, please, Ryan. This was also a year of dealing with local maintaining agencies. The range of issues could be an indication of future challenges for LMA sustainability. Although the legislation failed this past session, RD 900, which has assumed a portion of RD 537, is expected to again seek authority for annexing a maintenance area 4 in West Sacramento. The Mid-San Joaquin system wrestles with non-functioning LMAs like RD 2031. We're contending with the requirements from the State Controller's Office to disband due to inactive status and the remaining maintenance responsibility if they do. And finally, we have RD 784, which shows you most recently might recall they're compelled to abandon facilities, in this case, the Horseshoe Levee, with no way to raise monies for operations and maintenance. We remain hopeful that a compromise of landowners and RD 784 can be reached, and we'll continue to facilitate conversations as long as they continue to be productive. Similarly, there was strategic engagement with ongoing projects like the Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District, the Yellow Bypass Partnership, the Natomas Project, with CEQA's Oversight Management Group, and the Levee Engineering Circular and cross-levee fences, as you recall. And next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. We continue to maintain public relations, participating in and attending various flood management events, albeit virtually this year. Leslie mentioned a few of those. The FMA conference, as was highlighted earlier, there's a couple of you, along with board staff, participated in or moderated in panel discussions. Congratulations again, President Egger, on your achievement award. It was a proud moment for all of our board staff. Executive Officer Gallagher and I attended the National Virtual Conference, as was mentioned earlier, where Executive Officer Gallagher is a board member. We learned about FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or their BRIC program, among other things. But the BRIC program is FEMA's attempt to be more innovative with their investments, allocating 6% of the funding that they receive towards funding for local communities. They want to make sure that it's guided by 6 principles, including supporting community capability and capacity building, encouraging and enabling innovation, promoting partnerships, enabling large projects, and maintaining flexibility and consistency. Chief Engineer Michael Wright and I attended the National Waterways Conference annual meeting, where we heard from ASARD James about reforming the principles, requirements, and guidelines to maximize benefits, and as long as, in addition to the congressional forecasts on board at that time. We also learned about FEMA's Risk Assessment 2.0, that considers more than just the flood zone that people are in. We have regular flood partner calls, as well as the Natural Resources Agency calls that Leslie made reference to as well. And finally, like many others, flood management is a relationship-oriented industry. Recognizing this, we continue to foster and maintain relationships with local government leaders throughout the Central Valley. And with that, that concludes my presentations for this year's event. I'd like to turn it over to Jeet Dua, our counsel, for his portion. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Jeet, we hear you.
Thank you. Good morning, President Egger, Vice President Dolan, members of the board. Ryan, next slide please. So as I presented last month at our regular board meeting, the Title 23 update for our Article 8 standards and those definitions that are impacted by those standards was submitted to the OAL, and it has been published in the Register. Our 45-day comment period is scheduled to end on January 11th of 2021. We are in the process of doing the environmental review and anticipate adoption and publish of or final of those regulations in the first quarter of this year. Next slide, please. I support the land management branch. One of the big things that we were able to accomplish this year, it took quite a bit of effort. Environmental branch chief and land management chief Andrea Buckley introduced me to San Joaquin County. They were looking for an agreement. We had some issues on our properties with homeless encampments, and they had a very nice program. They had some problems accessing our properties. So this took an effort going all the way up to the governor's office for approval, but we were able to enter into an agreement for the cleanup and abatement of homeless encampments, where the county is offering all of the wraparound services to either house or otherwise facilitate needs for the homeless population out there. Also assist on our leases, our acquisitions and conveyances, all of our TEPs, the coordination with our other state and local agencies. We continue to work on the public access issue with the Fremont Weir with DWR and Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then just the general maintenance of our properties. Next slide, please. I also provide support to Darren Suen, and I won't go into detail on these since Darren spent quite a bit of time on this, but you can see them here. Again, it's the working group with the Delta Stewardship Council and DWR, the RD 784 issue that we're hoping to resolve, the general RD consolidation, dissolution, and assistance issues, AB 1958, which Darren spoke about in length, formerly AB 137, and would note that that we were the primary drafters for the proposed legislation, the language, and then also the Stockton Area Homeless Task Force, which is a joint task force between ourselves, State Water Resources Control Board, Caltrans is on there, and then also some of the local agencies in Stockton dealing with some of the other homeless issues that they have. Next slide, please. Litigation. We currently have the two active cases. There's the Meyer matter, which was a challenge to the board's enforcement order. There's a Security National Insurance Company. It's an inverse condemnation claim over damage to a property that is alleged to have emanated from a board property. And then we resolved the Puda Creek CEQA challenge this past year. That was quite a big project and it's quite successful. So it was good to put that one to rest. They continue to coordinate with our Deputy Attorney General on our litigation matters. Next slide, please. I continue to provide board staff support, particularly in Sarah Backus's absence, as she is one of the volunteers for the contact tracing effort. So I have resumed my former role of providing staff report for those things that she was doing while she was working with us. Ryan, next. We have our public record act requests. We seem to be having an uptake over the past couple of years of these requests. I work with our PRA coordinator, Detta Hunt, DWR's PRA attorney, who provides quite a helpful service in their staff as well. Next slide. Oh, and I guess that was it. Thank you. So next is Catherine and Amber to go over our administrative services.
Catherine, if you're on, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I just did that. Sorry. Good morning, President Edgar, Vice President Dolan, members of the board. Amber and I are going to go over the administrative highlights that we have for this year. So next slide, Ryan. So first of all, as many of you know, we've been working on the strategic plan, putting a draft together, working on the next phase. So all of that is in progress, and you'll hear more about that with Michael's presentation. We did implement a small reorg for a new branch supporting the Prop 68 Yellow Bypass program work. So that was a little bit of work trying to get that small branch in, and that will be under Michael. So you'll see that in our next org chart update. And then again, like Leslie said, this whole COVID pandemic had kind of put a wrench into a lot of things that we were already working on. So from March to about August 30th, the admin team had been working very diligently. When COVID started in March, I was on medical leave. So Kim Oliphant and Amber Warrenting did most of the work in trying to get people set up working from home. And a lot of that was just tremendous coordination, trying to make sure everybody had what they needed so they could continue working. There was a lot of IT deployment, IT issues, workflow, communication processes. All of that is complete. It seems to be running a lot smoother now, but in the beginning it was a little bit rough. We do a daily reporting. We started that in March, and we do that. We continue to do that today, and we report into resources of any illnesses we may have. We did it, actually Amber did an employee engagement survey, seeing how people were doing working from home. Is this something they want to do going forward? Is it something that has been difficult for them? We just really wanted to get a sense of how the employees were doing. And so we took that data and tried to fix some of the issues that they were experiencing. And we continue to have all manager meetings, and within those meetings, just trying to make sure everybody's updated on the latest communication. Excuse me. We include some leadership, like mini trainings, and that's ongoing. And then for us, one thing that sort of slowed us down with COVID was we were doing a lot of process improvements for all the processes in administrative services, but we continue to try to work smarter with the personnel that we have. Next slide. Excuse me. So for our budget update, it's just a very high level update. Our general fund, we start with about 10 million every year. It only goes up a couple $100,000. So as of 7/1, we're working with 10.8. And then as of 11/18, we're right on track. We've spent about 31%, and the funds remaining are 7.4. And then a little update for the Prop 68. The budget for this is 2.1. We're allotted about 900K for each year for a 3-year term. We have not started this yet. We are working on hiring first, and we're trying to do it in a kind of segmented or like a staircase, so that we have one person hired and trained, and then we hire the next, and then the next. So we're working with Michael on that. And then for the SSJDD feasibility study budget, that started at 1.3. The expenditures to date are about 200K. We have remaining about a little over $1 million, and we have to liquidate by June of 2022. So it has to be wrapped up by that date. So that's the, I'm sorry. Did somebody say something? No? Okay. So up next is Amber Wartink, and she is our Human Resources Manager. So I'll hand it over to Amber.
Good morning, President Edgar, Vice President Dolan, members of the board. I have just a couple of slides here to let you know a little bit about our recruitment and workforce over the last year. Beginning of the year, we had 44 full-time positions. With the addition of the 3 BCP positions for the Yellow Bypass work, that brought us up to 47 current positions for full-time. Workforce breakdown is here. I'm not going to go through all of them. As you see, we are still very heavy on our technical staff, as we should be. We have, in addition to those 47 full-time positions, at the very bottom, you'll see additional part-time positions. We have 10. Those are either retired annuitants, student assistants, or intermittent positions, not permanent. For our recruitment efforts, although we were very busy with other areas, we still were doing, our very good work for the state. And so we had just as many recruitment this year as we did last year. We had 14 recruitment advertisements. We, again, established 3 new positions under Prop 68, and those 3 positions were broken out as Program Manager 1, a Senior Engineer Specialist, and a Senior Environmental Scientist Specialist. And again, as already mentioned, we established a new branch for those Prop 68 positions, and we are titling that Flood Planning and Programs Branch. That will be effective January 1. That's what I had. And up next, we'll be having Andrea Buckley, Environmental Services and Land Management Branch Chief.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Andrea.
Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Andrea Buckley, Environmental Services and Land Management Branch Chief. Ryan, next slide, please. I'd like to start with a quick personnel update. The Environmental Services and Land Management Branch is fully staffed and with 4 senior environmental scientists, 1 senior right-of-way agent housed at the board, and 1 senior right-of-way agent housed within DWR. And happy to report we had 0 turnover this year, which really helped out in maintaining some of the efficiencies. Next slide, please. For our 2020 environmental staff actions related to CEQA, we successfully transitioned to an electronic submittal system for CEQA documents to the state clearinghouse, which really increased some modernization in our processes. We began that effort in November prior to the telework order, and that really gave us the jump start we needed, and we benefited from that implementation this year. For CEQA determinations filed this year, we made 111 CEQA determinations. For reference, in 2019, we processed 128, so down only slightly. For CEQA comment letters submitted to the state clearinghouse, we submitted 22 comment letters related to jurisdictions, board's jurisdiction on proposed projects. And for reference, we submitted 26 letters in 2019. Next slide, please. Here's a list of our lead agency review and certifications that we completed in 2020. In coordination with DWR's Flood Projects Office, or in some cases with Flood Management Office. We have American River Common Features, WRDA 2016 projects, Contract 1 and 2, and 2017 Storm Damage PL 8499. Next slide, please, to continue. We also had some topographical geotechnical boring determinations that we made related to common features and the Sac Bank project. Next slide, please. For lead agency review and for future certification, I wanted to call attention to, we will be bringing for recommendation for certification in the next 2 weeks at the board meeting for December, the Sac River Erosion Contract 1 55.2 left bank protection. And in the first quarter, we hope to see Sacramento Weir widening and American River Contract 1. Next slide, please. We continue to provide coordination services to the Army Corps Section 408 in relation to Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. coordination services related to NEPA for our applicants, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Section 7 coordination. Next slide, please. We also participated in what we would consider special projects. We were very active with CIGMA this year. Board staff reviewed and commented on a total of 31 groundwater sustainability plans with critical overdraft basins in the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley. In addition to providing comments on those plans, board staff were involved in work groups and committees to discuss CIGMA-related issues, particularly subsidence. Board staff participated in the CIGMA work group, which provides a forum for alignment, collaboration, and coordination with DWR and ultimately local, state, and federal entities establishing regarding the establishment of a statewide subsidence monitoring network to collect, manage, and report subsidence data. Board staff also meets monthly with DFM staff to initiate dialogue. You'll hear more about that outreach effort with our program manager, Ruth Darling, during her presentation. Additionally, as part of the Delta Mercury Control Plan, the board participated in the development of the Mercury Open Water Report. The report, submitted to the Regional Water Board on August 31st, evaluates the potential effects of operational changes in mercury cycling and methyl mercury in Delta channels. Next slide, please. For our land management side of the house, we heard about last year our new Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District parcel database, which is in full use. This year, we have increased some usability by adding all the scanned documents, deeds, easements, and agreements related to each parcel. We also made a public platform of the parcel database, which we make available to our partners, LMAs, RDs, and the general public. Additionally, we assisted in integrating the SSGDD layer into the board's encroachment database. Next slide, please. In regards to our Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District leases, we presented a competitive bid workshop to familiarize the board with the water code authorities related to competitive open bid leasing of SSJDD property. We received approval from Department of General Services Assistant Chief of State-Owned Leasing and Development to lease 2 parcels as sole source and not subject to competitive bid, which should really streamline the process for bidding for leasing those properties. We also corrected an invoicing discrepancy on a high-value oil and gas lease, and that resulted in an increase in revenue generation. Next slide, please. We issued 5 licenses related to either in conjunction with an encroachment permit, geotechnical or biological surveys, or proposed project. And here's a list of those licenses that we issued this year. Next slide, please. We also issued 8 temporary entry permits on SSJDD property, allowing either one-time access or temporary access for construction or surveying on various projects. Next slide, please, to continue the list. Next slide, Ryan. We also processed the taxable possessory interest annual report for Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Solano counties to fulfill the requirement that every public owner notify the assessor of lease creation, lease renewal, sublease, or assignment of lease, which convey rights of possession of publicly owned real estate pursuant to the Revenue and Taxation Code. We also processed the annual 37 assessment invoices totaling $25,843 for 2020 on Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District properties owned in fee. And we processed 20 notice of violations or abatement notices from various counties related to issues on Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District properties. Next slide. And the last issue, as we saw, the state saw a rise in the occurrence of homelessness. We responded to the Executive Order N2320 and coordinated with DGS to identify and analyze excess state property within our charge to provide short-term or emergency housing. As you heard from Council Dua earlier, we executed a programmatic right of entry for San Joaquin County to enter onto the property in Stockton area for the county and their contractor to address debris cleanup of encampments, This is the first for a board, and we are confident it can become a pilot effort to be used with other local governments seeking programmatic entry and abating nuisances on Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District properties. We are also very active in the Stockton Area Agency Homeless Task Force, which you also heard about from Council Dua, with Regional Water Quality Control Board, CDFW, and local governmental agencies to address the impact of encampments within the region. And I believe that concludes my presentation, and I will turn this over to Greg Harvey, the branch chief for the Plan Implementation and Compliance Branch, to continue his updates for 2020. Thank you.
Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. I'm, like Andrea just said, I'm the chief of the Plan Implementation and Compliance Branch, and I'm going to go over our operational programs and some of the accomplishments for 2020. Next slide, Ryan. So the operational programs I'll be focusing on today are our Section 408 alteration permitting, our U.S. Army Corps and board-sponsored studies and projects, the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, and some of the special projects that don't fit into those other categories. Next slide, Ryan. So some of the projects that we either issued a permit for or a no objection letter this year from the Army Corps Section 408 section, Delta Conveyance Project, as you're all familiar with, the Fremont Weir Fish Passage Project, also known as the Big Notch Project, and some of the other ones on that list. We issued a permit for the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project that Leslie showed some pictures earlier of the board members actually got to go out and see in person. Next slide, Ryan. So here's some photos of some of those projects. We issued the no objection letter for the Delta Conveyance Project. Next slide. So this is the Fremont Weir Restoration and Fish Passage Project, also known as the Big Notch Project. Just some photos of that area. We issued a no objection letter for that project. And then also the Lookout Slough. Just recently we issued to the Army Corps our second no objection letter, and this project is anticipated to have a permit issued at the first quarter of next year once we get the 408 permission letter from the Army Corps. Butte Slough outfall gates. This is a DWR project. They are updating their outfall gates in this area, and we just issued the no objection letter for that. Bear River Setback Levee Project. The Army Corps has the updated plans right now. Earlier in the year, we issued the no objection letter, and we anticipate to issue a permit in the first or second quarter of next year. The Goldfields Project, that is almost completed right now. We issued a time variance request for them to continue their work into the flood season, and they're wrapping that up right now. And we issued a encroachment permit for that project earlier this year. Lower Elkhorn Basin Setback Project. This is all the board members are pretty familiar with this project, and it's just started construction and super successful. We issued the encroachment permit earlier this year for that. A lot of work went into this project. So next slide, Ryan. Sabufka, we're wrapping up issuing permits for the already constructed work for that. This year, we reviewed 3 separate sets of 11 applications each for project areas B and C. And as soon as the Army Corps finishes their review and issues us the letter of permission, the 408 letter of permission, we will issue encroachment permits for all 33 of those. And a little down from last year. I think last year we had 55 or 60, but still great work. And then also the San Joaquin River Basin, Lower San Joaquin project, the PPA and LPPA, a lot of work went into that. And as Leslie showed you those great pictures, photos of the Army Corps and CEQA, or not CEQA, I'm sorry, the CVFPB and Bill Edgar signing that PPA. That was a great success. Next slide. So just a little summary of the activities for those areas. 36 permits were issued this year. No objection letters for the Big Notch and Lookout Slough, Butte Slough Outfall Gates, and the Bear River Setback Levee. And then we completed the PPA, no PPA for the Lower San Joaquin. Also, a little more summary of activities. So informational briefings for all of those projects. We try to do an informational briefing before we send the no objection letter to the Army Corps or issue a permit. But we also gave informational briefings on the Chester Diversion Dam overview, and then also on our newly established Sacramento Levee section that I'll be talking about here shortly, that oversees the Army Corps and board-sponsored projects in the Central Valley. So next slide. So we also began the Designated Floodway Modernization Program task order. We're about to get that going right away. That's one of our special projects. And staff also participated in the review of the Army Corps Engineer Circular, and we review O&M manuals. Staff reviewed the project completion report for the Oroville Wildlife Project and other tasks. Next slide, Ryan. So the other operational program is the Army Corps funded projects and the board-sponsored projects. In the Central Valley, we've got the American River Common Features and the Thomas Basin, Folsom Dam Raise, and then in closeout phase, we have the American River Common Features, WRDA 9699, and the Joint Federal Project and the South Sac Streams. And our newly created Sacramento Levee section is dealing with those. At the end of 2019, we hired Selva Mohan, and he heads up that section. And just this year, we hired 3 more engineers and a research analyst. So that section is fully staffed right now, which is fantastic. So the American River Common Features, we have the Sacramento River East Levee, we have the Sacramento Weir bypass and widening, and we have the American River Levee's erosion work. Next slide. So the Sacramento River East Levee proposed remediation plan. We've got the Sacramento River East Levee Contract 1, 2020 construction work. About 3 miles of cutoff wall has been completed, and I'll show a few photos of that. And then we're also working on the encroachment. So I think we have about 50 encroachments that the staff has to work out for the 2021 construction that's proposed to begin in the spring of 2021. So the Sacramento East Levee Contract 1, this is the completed 2020 construction work. Some photos along that area. About 3 miles of cutoff wall was completed. Next slide, Ryan. So Contract 2, these are the areas that are proposed for construction in 2021. And yeah, we have staff is currently working on about 50 encroachments in that area that have to be modified and updated for that work to be completed. Next slide. So Sacramento Weir and bypass widening. This is also another great project. Staff attends monthly meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers and the department. And it's about 65% design completed right now, and construction is proposed or anticipated to begin in 2022. So the Thomas Basin, this is another ongoing Army Corps project that staff deals with. And starting at the bottom, you can see Reach A, and then working clockwise around. Reach A is 100% design. Reach B as you go up, construction started and will be completed in early December. Reach E as you go up and around. Project design is started and 35% construction is complete. And then as you come all the way back around, Reach H, cutoff wall and slope flattening has been constructed. And then at the bottom, I'll show some photos of the completed cutoff wall construction for Reach I. Next slide, Ryan. So this is the Reach I, some photos of the work along that area. Folsom Dam Raise. This is another ongoing Army Corps project that our board is the non-federal sponsor on. And also want to point out the pictures that Ms. Gallagher showed earlier. We were fortunate enough to get out there in person and have a great meeting and have everyone put their shovels in the ground and kick off the construction for that. It was great. So this is some photos from Dike 8 of that work, some ongoing construction. And then the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan 2022 update. Staff is participating in that. Staff attends bi-monthly meetings with the Department of Water Resources, and our staff is helping update the State Plan of Flood Control descriptive document. In the special projects, High-Speed Rail Authority, Chester Diversion Dam, Emergency Action Plan. I know our board's been briefed many times on this emergency action plan, and at the beginning of this year, it finally was officially approved, and so now our board has an official emergency action plan, which is great. And then our designated floodway modernization program. That's a task order we'll be working on to update our designated floodway boundaries and take a look at those because they're pretty outdated. So this is some photos of the high-speed rail project. Next slide, the Chester Diversion Dam. I know that our board's pretty familiar with. And then the designated floodway task order. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Igbo, the Chief of the Operations Branch, to give the highlights for the Operations Branch in 2020. Thank you.
Good morning, President Edgar, Vice President Donna, members of the board. I'm Igbo Liang, Chief of the Operations Branch. For board members Johnson and Gregory, I think probably this is the first time I'm introducing myself. So welcome to your first year-end board workshop. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to speak on behalf of the branch's 3 section chiefs for their team's accomplishments in the last year. Next slide, please. Before getting to the accomplishments, though, I would like to start with acknowledging those who have been working diligently, overcoming the unprecedented challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic since March. Another unique challenge to ours is that apart from the permitting section, more than half of our staff from other 2 sections are new. The start dates for new staff are shown on the slide. I also wanted to thank the legal counsel team, even though by organization chart, they're not part of this operations branch, but they've been helping us tremendously. We won't make the success without your great support. Also note that Sarah and John have worked as COVID-19 contact tracers since June, and Justin Lee from DOJ has been filling in for Sarah on the enforcement matters. Next slide, please. I grouped the branch's accomplishments into 3 categories: the routine operations, which are the core functions of the branch, and the operational improvements, which I think are necessary to improve the efficiency of the routine operations. And also there's some special projects and tasks. Next slide, please. This slide shows the key matrix we used to measure our accomplishment. This is for the permitting program for both 2020 and 2019. Note that in 2020, we have close to a 50-50 split between the board approved and the executive officer approved permits. Whereas for 2019, we have kind of proportionally more EO approver. You can also see that the workload and the productivity for the permitting program have been fairly stable between these 2 years. I think having stable and dedicated permitting staff and also an effective adjustment to telework are the 2 major factors for the section's work productivity. Next slide, please. The enforcement program has faced significant staffing challenges. As I mentioned earlier, 3 of the 5 staff are new, and also 1 staff, John, has been assigned, volunteered to the contact tracer. So I think the program has worked admirably to overcome all the challenges. Despite the mixed results in productivity, I believe the work in the enforcement section has done a remarkable job. Next slide, please. The matrix for the inspection program show similar productivity between 2020 and 2019. It's worth noting that inspections have been carried out not only by inspection section staff. By the way, 2 of the 3 section staff are new. Also, the inspection work also carried out by 8 DWR DFM's inspectors, the 2 DWR DOE inspectors, and in some cases by our permitting staff. Next slide, please. Another important routine program in the branch is the local maintenance agency support program, including the storm damage repairs. Enforcement section staff Eric Mall has been the liaison between local maintenance agencies and the federal and state agencies to coordinate storm repair projects. Through fundings from the federal PL 8499 program and the state's storm damage DWR emergency response program, we continued to making progress in 2020 for damage repairs for 2017 storms. However, of the 13 USES, the federal funded and 28 DWR funded project planned for 2020, only 7 from the federal funded and 15 from DWR funded completed in this year. There are 6 federal funded and 8 DWR funded repair project pushed to next year. And there's a difference of 5 DWR sites we're looking to kind of further pushed to possible 2022. Those delays mostly because of the pandemic, because of a permitting issue, because also the contract issue is getting delayed. Also note that for the 2019 storm repairs, the 4 sites planned for this year got delayed to next year. Next slide, please. The enforcement section staff also leads the local maintenance agency support program in PL 8499 eligibility assistance. The board's goal has always been to regain and maintain PL 8499 eligibility for all systems that local maintenance agency operate and maintain under assurance agreements with the board. This table shows the status for November 2020 and 2019. It breaks down the status in 3 categories by number of systems, by levee miles, and by population percentage. The major change in 2020 is that there were 5 new systems, totaling 17 levee miles from the South Sacramento streams that became active in the list. However, the major work undertaken by staff has been maintaining the 32 active system through the letter of intent, LOI, and system-wide improvement framework SWIFT path. Staff reviewed and submitted on behalf of local maintenance agencies for 10 SWIFT progress reports, which representing 22 systems, and 7 draft SWIFT plans, which represent 10 systems, to Army Corps for their approval. To regain eligibility for inactive system, our staff has reviewed and submitted on behalf of local maintenance agency for 3 LOIs to users for approval. Next slide, please. Besides routine operations, staff has been consistently seeking opportunities to improve our operational efficiency. Our Enforcement Section Chief, Angeles Caliso, led the development of the Encroachment Viewer, which was launched early this year. It provides a geographic platform to view, query, and report data that's important to our regulatory programs. It integrates key data sources, including permanent enforcement database, DWR user data, board real estate information, SSJDD rights, hydraulic data information, etc., into one platform. This tool greatly improves our work efficiency. Next slide, please. Unique to this year is the teleworking arrangement in response to COVID-19 pandemic. So to adapt to this change, we developed protocols for digitally processing reviews and approvers, and also developed trackers for various review process for permitting, QBRs, staff reports, etc., to better coordinate and streamline our workflow. Next slide, please. The third category of accomplishment includes a number of special tasks. So we continue in the last year, we continue to implement the permit and inspection fee program. In 11 months of 2020, we received approximately $325,000, which is just below $30,000 per month in average. This is monthly revenue is slightly higher than that in 2019's 21,000, probably because in 2019 we were processing proportionally more applications received prior to fee implementation. Next slide, please. Another major effort led by inspection section staff is the ABO reclassification. In October board meeting, staff Priscilla and Preston gave detailed introduction to this effort, and we were wrapping up desk study and outreach on all 107 encroachments in Poodle Creek area. We will be sending permitting revocation package for board approval in early next year. Next. This is my last slide, but not the last but not least. The operations branch staff have contributed to a number of special tasks and projects listed on this slide. I'm not going to dive into detail for each of them, but I want to point a few of them. Our permitting section chief, Gary Lemon, has been supporting the Title 23 Article 8 update. And also inspection section chief Preston has been leading the inspection compliance work group discussion and meetings. And our enforcement section staff, Charlie Miller, has been as the assigned engineer for the no digging sign design and drawing. With that, this finish my presentation. I will hand over.
Thank you, Eagle, and I think we have Ruth next. Program Manager.
Ruth, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Executive Officer Gallagher. My name is Ruth Darling. I'm a program manager, and good morning, board members. I'm happy to be here today and showcase the accomplishments for the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan implementation for the year. Next slide, please. So my presentation will go over the CVFPB update implementation, as well as moving toward planning for the 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. I'll also discuss some of the work that's been done with the coordinating committee, as well as the board's advisory committee, and touch a little on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act efforts, as well as special projects and engagements. So one of the major components of implementation in 2019 and also the end of 2018, as well as into this year, has been the Yolo Bypass Cash Loop Partnership. So this is really the year that it's sort of taken off. We did receive funding in the beginning of the fiscal year from Prop 68 that you've heard about recently, to begin this effort in a more robust way. So I attend steering committee meetings with partnership members. Those are bi-monthly meetings, as well as the steering committee had developed a smaller group of members to develop a vision document. So this is really a document that can be handed to executives and also maybe the legislatures and leadership, describing what the Yolo Bypass Cash Loop Partnership is. It's 2 to 3 pages, and it's visually and aesthetically pleasing, and it really just hones in on the important points of the partnership and its intention and objectives. In addition, I facilitated and hosted the November 2020 workshop on the Yolo Bypass Cash Loop Partnership and Program. And that was a successful workshop that I think we had pretty robust dialogue on the efforts thus far. I participate and lead the Programmatic 408 work group. So in July 2019, we had sent the letter of intent to initiate the Programmatic 408 effort with the Army Corps of Engineers. So we now work with the Army Corps, DWR, board staff, as well as consultants on the Programmatic 408 effort, which includes the H&H work, as well as the environmental work, including both baselines and CEQA NEPA strategies, permitting strategies, operation and maintenance strategies. So I also participate in the operation and maintenance work group, environmental permitting work group, as well as the subgroups that surround environmental permitting. And I recently joined the team of Lower Sac Delta North RFMP group to participate in a floodplain management study with the Army Corps of Engineers. Next slide, please. And as you heard at the last month's board meeting, an update on the Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District feasibility study. So I'm the board staff lead for this study. This year we participated and held 3 rounds of stakeholder meetings, and this was to gain feedback on the approach to the development of potential service areas. And so as a result of those stakeholder meetings, we developed these categories that you see listed here, moving forward with the potential service areas. And so now at this point in the study, we're moving on to the technical aspects of the beneficiary analysis. And we plan to continue to hold stakeholder meetings throughout next year as well. They seem to be happening pretty quarterly, but they inform the feasibility study in general. So they're a big priority throughout the scope of the study. Next slide, please. For the 2022 CVFPB update, so the plan team had identified these 3 themes bulleted here: climate resilience, performance tracking, and alignment with other state efforts that will really be the themes of the 2022 update. And so moving forward, I participate in bi-monthly PDT meetings, project development team meetings, as well as strategic planning meetings, communication and engagement meetings, and as well as we recently started meeting on the supplemental programmatic environmental impact report, as well as the cultural strategy. And so I wanted to thank Jennifer Stewart, Andrea's staff. She'll be supporting the environmental effort for the plan update in 2022. In addition, we've had several engagement and outreach activities at the coordinating committee as well as the advisory committee. The board hosted a workshop in February of this year before we went on lockdown on communicating the technical analysis of the climate change approach for the 2022 update. So that really went over what was done in the 2017 plan and what the proposed technical analysis will do for the 2022 update. Next slide, thank you. So committees and work groups. So the coordinating committee is a public forum to discuss components of the plan implementation and advances of the updates. So this year we've really been, the planning team has used the coordinating committee as an avenue to showcase the advancements in this state system-wide investment approach implementation, and to gain feedback from the public and stakeholders that will help inform the 2022 update. In addition to the coordinating committee, the board's advisory committee welcomed a new chair, Brian Johnson. And in addition, he's supported by the current chair, Ms. Jane Dolan. And so the advisory committee really kicked off at the end of 2019, but has been doing a lot of work in the last 6 months on implementing multi-benefit projects. And so with the conservation strategy update for the 2022 plan, there's been a lot of effort put into how we implement multi-benefit projects and what are some challenges and impediments to doing that. So the advisory committee formed 3 subgroups: multi-benefit project implementation, permitting, and performance tracking. And those subgroups are all staffed by volunteers from stakeholders and non-governmental organizations. And so these 3 subgroups worked together and met on their own and developed a list of recommendations to help advance multi-benefit projects. And in addition, they identified several cross-cutting themes that include funding, the definition of mitigation versus uplift, as well as environmental justice. So another subgroup was recently formed to address recommendations for the cross-cutting themes. And all of these recommendations are expected to be turned in by the end of this year, and they will help inform the conservation strategy draft that is beginning right now, but is really moving forward in the first quarter of 2021. Next slide, please. And as you heard earlier from Ms. Buckley, we worked on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and Andrea's staff, Jennifer Callis, really did the heavy lifting for this effort. You heard earlier, we submitted comment letters to 31 groundwater sustainability agencies that documented their sustainability plans. In addition to that effort, we have worked with coordinating with DFM on their SIGMA activities as well. And the goal really, and I believe in 2021, would be to develop an outreach plan for engaging with groundwater sustainability agencies and that address their proposed projects in their GSPs that potentially have the potential to impact the board and the board's jurisdiction, as well as GSAs that as indicated in bullet 2, that GSAs that are in high and medium priority basins are currently working on their GSPs, and those are due in January 31st of 2022. So the idea was that if we could coordinate with the folks that are formulating their GSPs now, we might have a better opportunity to help incorporate flood components into their thought process when they're developing projects, because we really saw the flood piece missing from a lot of the GSPs that were submitted this year. So we're really trying to formulate a plan to head that off at the pass for the next round of GSPs. Next slide, please. And this is a special project. So in addition, I participate in the Lower San Joaquin Levee District efforts that are tackling their new challenges of operation and maintenance. This is in light of the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, that now that the San Joaquin River has been restored to its natural state, it's constantly wet, where for the past 15 years in the summertime it dried up. And the Lower San Joaquin Levee District had an easier time of maintaining their facilities. However, now they're facing new challenges on how to maintain their system in the wet. So we've been working to try with the DWR Southern District Office to come up with alternatives and cost analysis and efforts to help the Lower San Joaquin Levee District address these ongoing issues. I also participate in the Natural Resource Management Plan Task Force. So this is a task force that was developed by Sacramento County Regional Parks. They're working to complete a management plan for the American River Parkway. So some of this stems from the mitigation requirements from the Folsom Dam spillway. And so this is task force is comprised of locals, CEQA, as well as Parks Department, DWR, the Army Corps, and they meet monthly for 4 hours, and we discuss the proposed plans for the parkway that include mitigation, as well as erosion control and ecosystem uplift. So the plan is on a pretty tight timeline. I believe that they're hoping to have a plan out at the end of next year. In addition, I recently started participating in the Sutter and Tisdale Bypass Flood and Multi-Benefit Strategy and Management Plan. And so, given my experience on the YOLO Bypass Cash Loop Partnership efforts, it made sense that I stepped in and started following and participating in this effort because they have similar goals and objectives. And next slide, please. My engagements for 2020, I participated with Mary Jimenez from the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan team to brief the Delta Stewardship Council on the 2022 CVFPB update. In addition, I participated in the FMA Floodplain Management Association workshop on September 8th, and I was on a multi-benefit project panel with several other stakeholders from DWR and River Partners. Like I mentioned earlier, the board workshop on the YOLO Bypass Cash Loop Partnership occurred on November 6th, and the board, the Army Corps, and DWR will be participating in a workshop on December 10th, 2020, and this is an effort to for the state to showcase to the Army Corps of Engineers the state's vision for a multi-benefit future. Next slide, please. And our next presenter is Michael Wright. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is probably a good split time in between the two items. If you'd like to ask questions, we have all of our subject matter experts here, or if you'd prefer to take a break and come back, it's your choice. Did we lose Bill Edgar?
No, I'm here. I forgot to unmute. I'm sorry. Let's see. When are we going on to 4B after this? Is this where Michael's going to do his
Yes.
presentation? Okay. Well, I think we ought to have questions on this presentation. And Leslie, I must say that this is an excellent presentation. You've just done a terrific job, you and your staff, for doing this. I like it because it's a good summary of the monthly reports we get from the staff. But this is an annual summary, which is brings it all together, and it's actually very impressive considering the year we've been through. You've done a great job and very impressive. So I think we'll take questions on item 4A, then take a break and come back to the presentation on 4B. Are there any questions from the board members?
I have a question.
Okay, Joe.
We had several different people talk about the legislation for the homeless. And I know talking with Clyde McDonald, our ex-member, had a view that we had all the authority we needed out there. And so my question on this is, what authority are we looking for that we don't have?
Mr. President Edgar, if I could chime in on that.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Country, for the question. Our involvement came about when we heard from the city of Sacramento. Their law enforcement officers were unwilling to enforce. As you know, our jurisdiction spans across multiple agencies, multiple law enforcement agencies. The intent behind this legislation with the working group and obviously supported by the assembly member was to give a more cover, for lack of a better term, that would enable law enforcement agencies to feel comfortable enforcing the authorities, as you mentioned, that we already have. Now, whether or not there's many independent actions that are occurring. For example, you heard G. Dood talk about the Stockton working group, and we've coordinated with them there to do some cleanups along their areas and in our SSJDD. But the city of Sacramento has chosen to adopt their own local ordinance that would enforce, with their belief being, or I should say their interpretation being, the Boise decision. They're stating the homeless have other places to sleep. So if the Boise decision said you can't criminalize homelessness, and if you have nowhere else to go, that would be criminalizing them. But their position, the city of Sacramento's position, was that by adopting their local ordinance of areas where people were not allowed to camp, they still had other places to go. Now that hasn't been challenged yet, but that's been their philosophy. And then you have areas, other areas north of here in southern Yuba counties that are choosing to enforce, without any other additional help. So this wide range of things, people are making their own interpretations absent a statewide or Central Valley-wide legislation. And so my hope was to have a conversation with the working group and the assembly member and the Senate committee consultant on whether they want to pursue something going forward. So to answer your question, we do have the authority. However, we are not the enforcing agencies. And so the question would be, what would enable these law enforcement agencies to carry out that authority without fear of reprisal from from advocates who invoke the Boise decision as their defense?
Thank you, Darren. That clears that for me. Thank you.
If I could, this is Jeet Dua. If I could just add on to what Darren said, I wanted to to raise a couple of points discussed during board meetings when we were trying to foster this discussion and help the legislation get through the process. If you recall, board member, in one of the main issues efforts of legislation was to designate flood control system as critical public infrastructure.
Jeet, I'm having a hard problem understanding you.
Okay, can you hear me a little more clearly now?
No, you're echoing.
Huh, that's interesting. I'm just on my computer. It's still happening?
Try to turn off your video, Jeet. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah, I'll stop the video. Is that better?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm in the office. So as I was saying, one of the main points of the legislation was to designate the flood control system as critical public infrastructure, which we thought was sorely needed as an awareness tool, if nothing else. As we gave examples, people would not be able to, camp in the middle of a highway or on Folsom Dam or any other type of critical infrastructure that's needed. The other was that the current language, although it does prohibit cutting and altering, our local partners felt like it didn't meet the current needs of what we're seeing today, and that being extended periods of people residing on the levees and covering, so inspections and maintenance could not be performed adequately. So that was the expansion of the water code statute that prohibited cutting and altering of the levee. That's all I wanted to add to what Darren had already mentioned.
Thank you, Jeet. Any other questions or comments on the presentations? Brian?
Thank you, President Edgar. I have two. So first off, I just want to thank all of the staff who presented and everybody who contributed to those presentations. I thought it was very helpful and comprehensive, and I know that something like that doesn't just happen. It happens because people put effort into it, and I appreciate it. And also wanted to, just thank you and express appreciation for the underlying work. It's clear that you've kept the pace and had a good year under really trying circumstances here in 2020. And Leslie, I'm with you on just wanting 2020 to be over. So, knock on wood, for these last few weeks here, and hopefully, turn the page and get through the beginning part of the next year and, have the vaccines come online. So thanks, everybody. The second thing is a comment that kind of goes to the bridge between this presentation and this agenda item looking backward and the next one looking forward. And I wonder, President Edgar, if you and Leslie have an internal, master calendar of key dates and milestones for, staff milestones on the major work streams and things that would be coming to the board. I know we set the meeting schedule for next year. I imagine that Leslie has a pretty good idea what's going to be coming at different times. And I know all the project managers have their key dates and milestones in mind. But if something like that exists, it might be, looking out a year or even, beyond for the really big up milestones. I think it'd be helpful for me, at least as a board member, to be able to look out in advance for those. And I can imagine some of our partners and stakeholders, also appreciating it. And I'm not imagining a 100-page document with a lot of detail. I'm thinking, just the big milestones for the big work streams and when things would be projected. We see those individually on workshops, that you'll the dates looking ahead. And so if I went back through all those, I could probably piece it together. But, having a living document like that might be something to consider.
No, let me just respond to that. I think that's one of the next steps on the following item that we're going to have. The first thing we want to make sure of is that the priorities and the strategies that are set forth in the strategic plan are consistent with the board's priorities. And I have some concerns about some of them, and maybe the other board members do also. But we want to get those pretty much pinned down first, and then we'll refine the strategies and strategic plan, get that done, and then put a calendar to it. That's what we're going to try to do, and that's what actually Leslie's asking the board to do in the next item. But that's absolutely a good point, Brian.
Yes, thank you.
Let's see, anybody else at this point?
Vice President Dolan.
Yes, this is Jane.
Yes. Yes.
I really do appreciate and thank all of you for this presentation. And I really look forward to the PowerPoint being sent to us so that I can keep that as a review of the accomplishments. And many of you talked about the going forward. But it occurs to me that this story needs to be spread a little bit more. Is this something that's placed on our website in some kind of highlight and not just buried in, did you find the December 4th, 2020 board meeting activities? And then just a little shout out to Hugo Lane. I'd really appreciate that you put your chart of your, let's see, you're the branch and you have the sections. I always have to figure this out. And you gave us the names. So thank you. Just welcome to all of you, amazing, energetic new staff members. And thank you to those of us who are continuing. I think that it's going to be a great partnership. But I think what occurred to me as a board member, and I was looking at that as I was reviewing the draft strategic plan, which still needs some work, in my opinion. But it gave me kind of an indication where those of us on the board who have some kind of liaison assignment or have some interest in a particular thing, how to address the office chiefs and branch chiefs with some input that we could perhaps provide to, I think, help. And I think my message is that's what we're here to do. We love to listen. We love to give input at board meetings, but in between, I think we need to improve some conversations on that.
Thank you, Jane. Anybody else? Okay, I think, Leslie, at this point, we'll take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back in 15 minutes and take on item 4B, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, members, we're back in session. Leslie, again, thanks to you and your staff for just an excellent presentation on the year activities and what we've done to date. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President.
We're members.
Mr. President, this is Jane. I just want to check that you can hear me. I now can hear you. At some point at the end of before I took the break, everything froze in my computer.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you.
Okay.
All right. Members, we're on item 4B. Michael Wright is going to lead us through the presentation and discussion on the proposed 2020 strategic plan and 2021 staff priorities. However, before he does that, let me, and perhaps Jane wants to talk too, let me make some comments. First of all, with the strategic plan, those that have been around a while, Joe and Mike and Tim and so on, will notice that the 4 original goals in the old strategic plan have been revised and modified to update and focus on the current situations and activities as they've changed since the last plan. And then a 5th goal has been added, which is the alignment with the governor's 2020 water resiliency portfolio, which is obviously appropriate because that's what the governor wants us to do. Now, the staff strategies, you will note in the plan, have been colored green and red. The green ones indicate that the staff is already performing these activities and intends to continue them throughout 2021. The ones in red are priorities for the staff, but the red indicates that additional resources are required to initiate these activities. And at the present time, because they do not have additional resources, they don't anticipate any progress in these areas. Now, at this meeting, the staff is looking for kind of overarching comments regarding staff priorities that will serve as guidance for them so they can finish up the plan and wordsmith the wording and do all the detailed work in accordance with the board's overall direction. So I want to make sure that the board understands that the objective here is not to get into the weeds and start to wordsmith all of these different strategies and so on. What the idea here is to take a overall view from the top, looking at the goals, looking at some of the strategies maybe, and then make sure that from your perspective, we have the universe of activities that we want to address incorporated into the planning document. And then the idea would be to turn this back to Leslie, have her maybe select a couple of board members to help her go through the plan with some of the staff, and Michael has been actually working on this in terms of shepherding it through, working with the staff to fine tune it and bring it to the board for approval. And so that's what the idea would be to do. And as I said before, Jane and I had a chance to review some of these things for the staff, with the staff yesterday, and we went over it. And the thing for me, the thing that I noticed was, I'm looking at the system by which we do our core activities as trying to smooth it out and make it efficient and effective. And the two core activities we have are to issue permits and enforce compliance. Mary Jane Griego already told us that she thinks the permitting system is flawed and needs changing. And Preston Shopwell has been working very hard to try to reduce the time spent on that. But unfortunately, we still haven't got it below what we want it to do. And I guess that's because there's too many agencies involved. There's us and the Corps and the department. That by the time everybody else gets involved, the time to address these permits is unlike what Mary Jane and myself are used to, and that is, for a city in the county, you can usually get a permit done within 30 days, even less. If go to a counter and you can get some permits. So we were looking for something like that, and so far we've not been able to do that. But we're still hoping to deal with that. But in any event, I look at the process that we have is that our plan itself is the document that sets forth the policy that we want to do. And then we have different tools to implement that policy. And one of the critical tools is the implementation, or the regulations, Title 23 regulations. And what I saw in the plan was Title 23 regulations in almost every section of the plan were in red. Well, they can't be in red. we gotta bring the regulations along with what we're trying to do here, or we're going to get answers from the attorneys just like we have when we address the fence issue. And that is, no, you can't do the fences because of the regulations, or no, Gary Lemon can't issue permits effectively because the standards in the regulations are inappropriate. Well, we've addressed the standards. They're over at the administrative law, but I think we need to, every time we want to do something, we can't have them impeded by regulations that are not current, they're not updated. And what I suggested, that some of those red items have got to be turned green. And if it means the staff has to get the resources somewhere else, well, they're going to have to do it. But we can't have regulations that are out of date, because that's our authority. That's what the attorneys have told us. That's our authority from the water code that allows us to enforce compliance. And we're going to run into a problem, whether it's Liam Meyer or whether it's Gary Lemon issuing permits or whatever. We've got to deal with those issues. So the objective for today is to take a look at the goals and objectives and strategies that Michael is going to summarize for us, and see whether there are any things that flash out at you, like the issue of regulations did to me. And there are some other issues that Jane addressed. And once we get that, then we're going to turn it back to Leslie and have her take a couple board members, take an afternoon and socially distance or whatever you're going to do, and get these, fine tune the strategic plan, wordsmith it if you want to do it, but do what we can to get this thing back to the board, hopefully sometime in January, so we can get the document adopted. The staff can prepare its work plan, and we can do what Brian Johnson wants to do, and that is attach a calendar to it, so we know what we're doing a couple months down the road. I think that's what he wants, and I think that's a good idea, and we ought to do it. So that's some comments just for the board's edification that Jane and I ran into. And before we turn it over to Michael, I'll ask Jane if she wants to add anything.
Yes, Mr. President, just briefly, thank you for that. You always give us a good orientation and detail to do. As your officers, Bill and I do discuss with staff agenda preparation and agenda logistics. And so the conversations kind of move to, wow, this is 82 items. How do we all do that? And so I think for today, it's pretty clear that this is our introduction of staff's draft for a strategic plan and goals and strategies. As your officers, we're not suggesting that only two of us work with staff on this. Leslie is completely ready for each of us to direct concerns, questions, suggestions to her. We can't do this group reply all kind of thing. So I think what's frustrating for all of us, and we all know this, 2020 and virus protocols just don't allow us to have the kind of meetings that we have had, to have a complete in-person interchange between staff doing the daily work and board with global ideas of how to improve the world. So we're going to have to work this through in the next month, 2 months to refine this so that it's a meaningful document and not just an agenda report. So thank you all.
Thanks, Jane. Michael, I'm going to turn this over to you unless Leslie or you want to make some other kinds of comments, but I'll just turn this over to you for now.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready. Ryan, can you pull up the presentation, please? Good afternoon, President Edgar, Vice President Dolan, and members of the board. I'm Michael Wright, Chief Engineer for the board. And before I get going into my presentation, I'd just like to take a minute to acknowledge the board staff and their efforts over the past years. Leslie mentioned earlier in the beginning of the year, within about a week, we went from our normal operations of everyone coming to work for their normal 8-hour shifts to sending all the staff home to take on a whole new work environment, working from home, which wasn't easy. There's been a lot of difficulties in making that adjustment. Many had to adapt to doing their normal day-to-day job while also taking on new roles at home, whatever those would be, the dogs, the kids, repairs, lots of things. However, the staff took on the challenge and we made it work. Our administrative staff were key in this effort throughout that transition, making sure everyone had all the tools and the equipment necessary to work from home. Filing any paperwork that we needed, they were really a big help in that. And overall, I just like to say I'm truly impressed with how our staff has reacted, adapted, and overcome the challenges of 2020 and have been as productive as they were in 2019. And you saw that in the presentations previously. All while doing so without two of our key staff, Sarah Backus, our board counsel, and John Tice, who is one of our most experienced enforcement staff. As you heard earlier, they volunteered to be contact tracers for the state. I'd also like to thank all of our managers in keeping their staff fully engaged and productive, as well as their staff in keeping our managers fully engaged and productive. All right, so now I'd like to get on to the presentation for the update of the strategic plan, which was originally developed and adopted by the board in 2013. All the board members have received a copy of the draft plan, and President Edgar kind of explained the colors that indicate certain things in the draft plan, but I will explain more of that later in the presentation. Before I get really into the update, I want to go over a little background for our new board members, and as a reminder to the board members that were here in 2013, and why we really are working on this 2020 update. So in 2009, the board was restructured and renamed from the California State Reclamation Board to the California Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And around the same time, the state was also evaluating water issues from a more strategic perspective to combine flood management, ecosystem enhancement, water supply, and other water management actions, collectively at that time referred to as integrated water management. As a result, the board established a 2013 strategic plan with the goals of improved accountability and transparency for the agency. The purpose of the 2013 strategic plan was to refresh the board's mission and goals, which it did, and develop specific objectives and strategies, and to define measures to hold the board and its staff accountable. The development of the 2013 plan took place over 6 months. It was a long process, and we worked through board workshops and executive committee meetings. At around the same time, DWR was also developing the statewide flood safe strategic plan, and the board felt it critical that the 2013 strategic plan of the board be compatible with the department's flood safe strategic plan. The board's strategic plan was adopted by the board June 28th, 2013. The state's priorities have been refined over the last 7 years, and the overarching goal of this update is to align with other state priorities for water management. As you can see by the graphic on the right, the board's 2013 strategic plan has run its course and is in need of an update. Today's discussion will outline the proposed update to the strategic plan. In addition, in April 2019, Governor Newsom directed state agencies through Executive Order N-10-19 to develop a water resilience portfolio in which the board is identified as a responsible agency for certain actions to meet California's water needs. The 2020 strategic plan update incorporates the water resilience portfolio actions that have been identified as board responsibilities. These actions and corresponding strategic plan strategies are included in a new goal, which President Edgar mentioned earlier, goal number 5, which is alignment with the governor's water resilience portfolio. The objectives and strategies of goals 1 through 4 have been revised and added to in order to reflect the dynamics of the board's authorities, responsibilities, staff, and resources. I wanted to throw this slide up to remind board members of where we were in 2013 and who was part of the board. And it's always kind of fun to look back in time at where we were. Okay, the 2013 strategic plan had 4 goals. Goal number 1 is one of President Edgar's top priorities, and that's to take care of what we have. Goal number 2 is all things Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. Goal 3 is about collaboration with partnering agencies to overcome long-standing issues, including climate change. And Goal 4 is about strengthening partnerships to incorporate multi-benefit projects and flood risk reduction programs throughout the Central Valley. This slide moves us from the 2013 plan more into the 2020 plan. The graphic on the right is from the 2013 strategic plan to show an example of how it was organized into goals, objectives, and strategies. Implementation of the strategies move the objectives towards completion, and completion of the objectives support and strengthen the goals. On the top left, you can see the goals, objectives, and strategies of the 2013 strategic plan. We had 4 goals, 8 objectives, and 29 strategies. And we feel that 23 of those strategies have been substantially completed or are currently being worked on or have made substantial progress. The themes of the 6 strategies that we really haven't been able to complete are kind of grouped into 3 categories. One is developing separate permitting processes for flood system improvement projects. For the 2020 plan, we've included developing permitting processes for multi-benefit and programmatic 408 processes. This is because our regulations currently were drafted for basically encroachment permits, which makes permitting anything else a little more difficult. The next category is to resolve encroachments that compromise the system. We all know that enforcement is a difficult task, and the board's enforcement staff work extremely hard to address encroachment issues. However, it's a ongoing, never-ending issue. As every weekend, new encroachments seem to appear. In our enforcement program, it's simply not staffed adequately to keep up with the amount of work necessary to cover almost 1,600 miles of levees in the Central Valley. And third category is local maintaining assistance. This is a task that we are kind of trying to do. We borrowed 1 staff from our our enforcement section to work almost full time on this, and includes working with our LMA partners through the Corps' Public Law 8499 eligibility requirements, their SWIFT program, their inspections and rehabilitation efforts, as well as looking to update O&M manuals when necessary, and eventually looking at our assurance agreements and updating those when we need to. On the bottom left, you can see the goals, objectives, and strategies of the 2020 update. We have now 5 goals, 14 objectives, and we're up to 80 strategies. So there's a big bump in what we think we need to do, but we've also grown quite a bit since 2013. Moving further into the 2020 update, the first 4 goals are the same as in 2013. However, we have added goal number 5, which is alignment with the governor's 2020 water resilience portfolio. And I'm not going to go over each of the 80 strategies that are included in the update, but I would like to identify the 6 additional objectives that we added to the goals. In goal number 1, we've added 3 objectives. As you can see on the bottom, they're in bold. Those are to improve our inspection program, establish a comprehensive land management program, and to better engage on flood risk reduction partnerships. For goal number 2, we've added objective 3.3. That's to increase relationships to advance flood interests. Goal number 3, we've added objective 3.3 to increase relationships. I just said that. I missed goal number 2. Hey, Ryan, can you go back a slide? Yeah, goal number 2. That's to advance efforts concerning climate change. And next slide, please. Goal number 3 is to increase relationships to advance flood interests. Goal number 4, we did not add any objectives. We still have the same objective. And goal number 5 is our new goal with an objective to align board goals as identified in the plan with the governor's 2020 water resilience portfolio. So now I'm going to get into a little more detail of the 2020 strategic plan update. But first, I'd like to explain how we've organized it, especially in the context of the presentation. So Ryan, can you go ahead and pull up the first page? Okay, so as you can see, some of the strategies are red and some are green. The green strategies, as President Edgar indicated earlier, those indicate the strategies the staff is currently working on or expects to be working on in 2021. And the red strategies indicate the areas that staff feel are of high importance, but the necessary resources or expertise are currently unavailable. The green strategies are really in no particular order, as we are currently working on those, but the red strategies are in order of highest priority to lowest priority. For example, from staff's perspective, strategy 1.1.8 is the highest priority to start on in objective 1.1 if the necessary resources become available. And what we would like as an outcome of today's workshop is to get a better understanding of the board's perspective related to the red strategies, either in the order of priority, or if a red strategy should be moved to green, meaning that staff would shift current resources to ensure that that priority would be accomplished. Goal number 5 is organized a little bit differently, and I will be going over that when we get to goal 5. I'd like to take a minute now to pause and see if there's any questions on how we've organized the strategic plan. All right, moving on. For each of the objectives, I'll highlight staff's top red priority. And again, these are strategies that we are currently not performing, but feel are important and should be considered. Actually, Ryan, can you go back to 1.1? So objective 1.1, strategy 1.1.8 is to create new and efficient permitting processes for multi-benefit and programmatic 408 projects. Our current regulations outline a process to basically issue permit encroachments or encroachment permits. We have used this process for system improvements and restoration projects, but it's not ideal. For objective 1.2, strategy 1.2.4 would be our highest priority, and that is to update Title 23 regulations in consistency with any amendment to the water code, and this would help us streamline our enforcement process in the event of an update to water code. Objective 1.3 is to improve our operation and maintenance of state plan of flood control. And as you can see, all of these strategies are currently red, meaning that we are not performing any of these tasks. Objective 1.3 is really the base of a potential new program. I sometimes refer to as a local maintaining assistance program. It covers working with the LMAs to ensure proper operation and maintenance, PL 8499 eligibility, updating manuals and agreements. And objective 1.4 is to improve our inspection program. As you can see, these are all red as well. We do have a well-running inspection program. However, with the current workload, they're unable to take on these additional tasks. Objective 1.5 is our land management program. Strategy 1.5.4 seeks additional opportunities for leasing and royalties revenue. And objective 1.6, strategy 1.6.4 is to engage in budget planning and forecasting for flood system projects. And again, I'll take a quick second to pause to see if there's any comments or discussion on objective or goal number 1. All right, hearing none, Ryan, can we move to goal 2? So goal 2 is implementation.
Michael, this is Bill. I'm sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Before you move on, some of these goals in the previous section, to me, are very important, particularly as we try to improve our permitting and enforcement program. So what it seems to me the next step would be to prepare a BCP related to the section of it improving the inspection function. Is that what you envision here?
That's yeah, that's something we can definitely look into. We have a lot of areas that we need to put more resources to, but inspection is definitely important as well.
Yeah, well, that one of the things we're gonna need to come out of this meeting with is a sense of what are the 2 or 3 items that we need to prepare BCPs for, so that we can lay the groundwork for that. Now I know there's no appetite for doing this, but at least if we go through the exercise of preparing a BCP, it'll get it'll kind of force us into the position of what's required, how many people it's going to require to do the job, and so on and so on. And at least we'll have it ready for when money becomes available. Anyway, just a thought.
Thank you. Jane. Dolan.
I got a hand up before the lawn blowers start again. I think it seems to me that if they're red and that indicates we don't have the resources to do it, it kind of gives a message that we're not. And I know that's not accurate. So perhaps the language could be pursue means to, and then say the things that we lack the resources to fully work on. And as I looked at some of the ones identified red by staff, I know we're making some progress, but not the progress we need to. So we could just, it's just a thought. So instead of saying specifically, we will pursue budget increases, I mean, that's sort of overall, everybody wants that. But pursue ways to do it, maybe add those things so that we're not just saying they're there and they're red. Just a thought.
Well, one of the things, Leslie, one of the things we ought to be looking at is we're going to be doing more 408 permitting requests, and we're going to be having to kind of shoehorn these permitting requests into this process that we have right now. And it seems to me if we can kind of break out the regulations that we need to focus on, or the low-hanging fruit that Jeet talks about, maybe we can do some of this because, for example, on the environmental enhancement projects or the environmental permits that don't require a lot of detailed hydraulic analysis and all of that kind of stuff that regular permits require, we need to have a provision that would enable us to do that pretty quickly and more appropriately. And those are the kinds of things that, as we look at our programs that we want to do, we need to factor in some money to address the regulations that will allow us to do it more efficiently and effectively.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. That's an excellent point.
Bill, I have a comment.
Yeah, Joe.
Okay, when I read 1.4.1, I don't feel very good about what we're doing. It says, the way I read this, it says we're not doing routine construction inspections. We're not reducing or we're not completing all of our inspections. We've got a backlog. We're not completing those. And we're not updating our records. If this is the fact, then I think we need to look at our overall staffing and move resources within our existing staffing. So this is not true. That we are doing all our inspections, that we are following up, we are doing it. This is our one of our basic duties here. And I'm concerned that we're not allocating resources correctly here.
Well, that's exactly what we want to hear, Joe. You want to turn those red ones to green ones.
Especially 1.4.1.
Yeah, Michael, maybe you or Eagle could explain that a bit. This is another one of those where it's a compound statement and probably should be broken out differently. The inspections are being done between all of the resources that are allocated to it. Some of the long-standing issues are a backlog that had built up over the years before the board had its own inspection section, and then all the records associated with that. And I believe that for 40 or 50 years, there was no attention on the designated floodway program, which is actually incorporated in another larger project that we have denoted elsewhere in this document. So can someone maybe give some more specifics on that?
Go ahead, Igor.
This is Igor. Maybe I want to just chime in here. I think you're all right. I think we are staff are doing this work, but my understanding of this item is to further expand our capacity, because the reason is we have way more work than our current staff are able to handle. So I mentioned in my presentation that we have 3 inspection staff, but most of the work are done actually by DWR. We have 8 DWR inspectors helping us, and also we have from DFM. We also have 2 inspectors from DOE also helping us. So we can continue to leverage their resource. And on the other hand, there's a new kind of a round of, I see the workload for the routine inspection, because the routine inspection condition has been added recently in all our new permits as a standard condition, which defines kind of in our fee Title 23 fee schedule. There's definition about inspection frequency And so because of those conditions, we are anticipating more routine inspection for the coming years. Those are the kind of the new, maybe a new round of scope and workload. So anticipating that, probably we need to like President Edgar mentioned, maybe a BCP to further expand our capacity. We have our inspection section chief Preston online, and maybe feel free to come in.
Yes, good morning, board members. This is Preston Shoppo with the inspection section. Hugo is right on. We are covering all the current needs for the currently permitted, newly permitted items, right? So we have coverage with our section. We pull from DWR inspectors as needed as backup. And also we've been utilizing the permitting section so that staff can understand, what gets built after they've worked so hard to process those permits. The backlog is more updating records that are in paper files that are buried in dungeons that we're trying to pull this all forward so we know where to spend our time. Ideally, as overseeing inspections, I'd like to have my inspectors spend more time on each site. But that's where the challenge is with limited resources. We have to really plan out our trips and be really effective on the days that we're out there to make sure that things are built correctly. So that's what we're trying to expand. And again, just like enforcement, we kind of assess the risk associated with the work involved, right? We're not going to spend all day out watching a fence being built, at the edge of our easement as much as we would a full pipe replacement, that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps with some of the how we're approaching that with our current resources.
Well, I mean, it helps me to some extent, but the wording of this doesn't indicate what you just said.
Right. That's right. And the same. This is the same thing with the regulations. We're trying to streamline our operations, improve the operations, and in some areas these regulations need to be changed to recognize that we issue permits for environmental restoration that should be done a different way, and could be, if we had another method of doing it, would be a lot easier. And the same with the inspections. If we're completing the mandated kind of inspections that Bo was talking about, then they ought to be in green. We intend to keep going with that. And what we don't do in red are the kinds of inspections and so on that we haven't done to date, and which is going to take a lot more work, and that is designated floodways and those kinds of things. But it needs to be broken out and spelled out a little bit better.
Bill, also, I've had this thought for a long time, and you probably all will kill me. I'm wondering, like on routine inspections, if we couldn't, maybe every other time or something, ask the districts through, and have their registered engineers certify an inspection. In other words, do a self-inspection some of the time for routine stuff. And, if you have a registered engineer and you ask them to stamp it, we should have some reliance that it would be done accurately.
Yeah, this business of being able to partner with the local engineer or the contract engineer for the LMA or somebody to help us with this stuff would be good.
Yeah, I don't think we should say every time, but I definitely feel like, maybe every other time we could ask them to do the inspection and submit the paperwork. I mean, it's something to consider if we have this additional inspection need out there where we could put some of our resources.
That's a great point. That's exactly the kind of feedback that's helpful for us, and we can certainly look at that. Yes, Preston?
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, utilizing all our partners, LMAs, yeah, flood risk reduction partners, absolutely. We'll take whatever we can get, and you know, more eyes, no matter where it's coming from, would be helpful for that. Because right, the routine inspections, they're done in a certain sense. You've seen DWR's annual inspection reports that look at the whole entire system. Encroachments are part of that. But frankly, the encroachments don't quite get the love that they need in terms of those routine updates, and that's what we're hoping to focus on. But again, with limited resources, doing those routine inspections that we require in our conditions and in the 408 permissions, that's the challenge, the upcoming challenge for us. So we'll utilize whatever we can.
Great.
Well,
yeah, let's open our mind to it.
Yeah. Now, Preston, for example, the example you gave, you know, you might just say that all the fences on the right of way, it should be done locally or with the engineer, and we'll take the pipes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, good points. I'm marking these down. Absolutely.
Especially, I'd say almost all the encroachment inspections could be done locally with a certification that they've been removed or not. I mean, that seems to be very low-hanging fruit for me. Why should we drive somebody, 60 miles someplace to look at something to see if it's removed when the locals are on the site and they can certify it?
We'll take a look.
Okay, President Edgar, do you think we're ready to move on to goal number 2?
Sure.
Okay, great. Ryan, can you scroll down, please? And thank you all for the feedback. That's, like Leslie said, that's exactly what we're looking for to further develop the strategic plan. Up next is goal number 2, and that's implementation of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. Strategy 2.1.6 is aimed at looking at the state plan of flood control facilities to determine where multi-benefit projects could be implemented and to look at opportunities to repurpose facilities that are no longer required or necessary for the flood system. Projects of this nature are similar to the Grasslands project the board approved last month. So that would be our first priority in that goal. So the strategies of objective 2.2 and 2.3 are all currently being worked on. I'm not going to spend much time on those. Are there any questions or discussion for goal number 2? Board Member Dolan?
I do. Can you go back to the first objective? I think that my input on 2.1.6 is that these are issues that can and should be addressed in the plan update. And I do know that there's considerable work in the conservation strategy on some of these that you're talking about. So perhaps this could be looked to plan update to address methods to repurpose or something like that. But multi-benefit and what's not there and how do we improve, and then there is that kind of nexus of what all the multiple, and there's hundreds of the sustainable groundwater management entities are doing and how it interfaces with the flood system. So I think this is something that we need to be watching with the plan and give input right now to the ones who are writing, right?
Thank you. Are there any other discussions?
Well, this is Brian. I just would second what Jane said, and this might be one where, on this, depending on what it ends up being, the surface of it, it seems like, time and money that we don't have in hand to work on something, but it could end up being, more cost effective over the long run to make good design decisions about how the system operates. So I like what Jane had to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Let me ask Michael or Leslie a question. This new branch that you have Ruth heading up with, is her job basically together with Darren's to affect the relationships with other agencies and stakeholders? Is that essentially most of her what she does, or what she's supposed to do with her work? Is that why we have both Darren and Ruth on these Sigma and the plan and coordinating committee and so on? Is that her job?
Mr. President, I appreciate that. I think you can probably see from her presentation that there really isn't a job that Ruth doesn't have at this point. The purpose of the new branch was specifically to work on the YOLO bypass partnership work that is being funded by Proposition 68 money.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Different.
And so, okay, so it's only, it's the YOLO bypass. And then as a result of just her background and expertise, she's been assigned these other duties that involve relational activities with the other agencies and so on. Is that
yes,
what's happening?
Much of her daily work includes that sort of collaborative work.
So if we're interested, this is the reason I ask is if we get more of these relationship building either with the stakeholders or other agencies or federal agencies for that matter, it sounds like Ruth and Darren are the go-to people on those kinds of issues. That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
Yes, at this point, that would be correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Other than you, of course.
Mr. President, Board Member Ramirez has his hand up.
Okay.
Can you go back up to 2, Michael, just real quick? To the top, 2.1, yeah. So one question about 2.1.1. In 2012, we attached a whole bunch of things to our resolution, and there was a pretty rigorous effort to track everything. And there was less of that in 17. But I don't know who's tracking it. Maybe you guys are. I don't know that we've seen a lot of anything. I can think of things that I know that I focused on then, and I don't know that I've heard much about them. But can you explain a little more about how we're tracking the commitments from 17?
I'd actually like to phone a friend and see if Ruth can chime in on that.
Hi, Board Member Ramirez. So that's a good question. I think that the best way that is tracked is through me and really just meeting the goals of that. But it's an actual tracking system. Am I echoing?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll back up. I'm not sure. Is it better?
Well, it is now. That probably is better.
Okay, I turned off my video. An actual tracking system we have not set up, but there is a robust effort for the 2022 update that includes performance tracking, and it does include some of the objectives in the board resolution. So along with DWR and that effort, I am participating in the progress made on the board resolution tracking. So it's right now it's a performance tracking document that consultants have prepared for the 2022 update that talks about our goals and how we've met them in the past 5 years. So I'm working to include the objectives from the resolution into that, although some are already there.
Okay, great. Sounds like consistent with Leslie's observation. She's just giving you more to do, and Just kidding. It'd be worth looking at that in the not too distant future, which I'm to bring that forward before we fully dive into the 22 update, just so we can be mindful of the foundation. So thanks for that.
Yes, and I'm writing that down. Thank you for the insight on that. Sometimes, tracking our progress sort of gets lost on actually doing the work. So I appreciate that.
It seems to me, Ruth, in one of her presentations, Mary had taken that into consideration, and I don't know whether that was incorporated in some of the work she's doing now or not. You might want to touch base with her.
Right. And so just on the plan update and all the meetings and efforts that I participate in, the draft documents that detail some of these efforts like performance tracking are on the SharePoint site, and we have, due dates for making comments on them, but they're all real in very draft form right now. So the ability to go in and add sections or objectives from the board resolution is still there. So I can discuss that with the planning team, but they're interested in meeting those objectives as well, and seeing how the board's progress is on that resolution.
Yeah.
And just in displaying that in the 2022 update and letting the public know where we're at and how far we've come.
Yeah, that'll be important. Okay.
Bill, I got another comment. If it's
sure.
The Corps has told us that they don't believe the upper part of the San Joaquin system is part of the federal project. And I'm wondering, because what makes me think about it, we highlight the Kings River Conservation District formalized review process for applications. What are we doing to consider how to handle permit applications and modifications in this area where seemingly we have complete control, because the federal government is just going to send a letter saying it's not part of the federal system? Have we done anything, or do we need to do anything to formalize the process in that area?
I'm not sure the state has formally recognized the Corps' pronouncement that they aren't involved in the San Joaquin.
Well, their letters to us make it pretty clear.
Well, yeah, they sent us a letter. It doesn't mean we think it's right.
But any action, the letter comes back and says, we have no objection. It's not part of our system.
Yeah,
so the way we've been handling that these last several years, the permitting staff, and you saw this just last month with the Grasslands project. So the permitting staff does send the application over to the Corps for their review. They typically will send back a non-fed letter saying we don't have a federal interest, so we have that in our file. And then the staff does utilize our existing regulations to make sure that the project improvements are up to date with Title 20 standards, and we issue permits. So we have been, we do consider that still to be part of the state and of flood control, even though the federal government doesn't recognize it anymore. And in situations like the Grasslands that you just saw, where we were actually taking parts of that system out of the state plan of flood control, the board was the last word on that. And that was part of your resolution that you just adopted. So we note for, posterity and for the future, in case anyone comes back later and says we didn't do it adequately, we did consult with the federal government. We keep that in our list, in our file, and then we move forward with the action.
And I guess that's fine as long as getting that core letter is not slowing anything down as far as our processing goes. So anyway, it sounds like you feel that it's covered.
issues for us do seem to be working out with our permitting, and just as it always has.
Well, maybe say it another way. If we think it's a problem that needs to be worked on, does it go someplace here, or under what umbrella would it fit? You know, if somebody tried to get flood damages reimbursed, we'd have a problem.
Correct. That is the downside of not having the federal involvement, is the PL 8499 program that they're ineligible for.
Right. So to Joe's point, if we wanted to spend time working on this to close that loop, maybe point to us where it would be. Point a place, if we think it's important, then we should list it somewhere so that we do that. Wait for the damage to happen and then try.
I think that's a really good point. This board is the pluses and minuses of having that portion either in or out of the federal or state federal system. So if that is a topic you'd like to discuss in detail and chart some path forward for how we might close that loop, as you said, and deal with that, we can certainly put that on as a workshop and do some more detailed work on it.
Yeah, I'm just one person, but I would like to see us try to address it head on rather than have to back into it. Maybe it's just an issue that we need to take offline and talk about and give some thought.
Yeah,
I agree with Tim. This issue's been batting around, and I think after January 20th, we might have an opportunity to engage a little bit more in this issue. And also, it's one that needs to be addressed in the plan. It just does. When you highlight that in the plan, then it will be a partnership effort for this to be resolved.
yes.
Now, what does that mean for, all this money that we've given Levee District 1 for work down there? Do they have to pay that back?
So, Mr. President, that was a program that was done by the department, and I believe that was their particular issue around that letter, is the concerns about the Proposition 1E money being spent there. I haven't recently to find out what the thinking is, but that definitely was an issue for them.
Well, yeah, I would think so, because, Reggie doesn't have any money to do that. And by taking this issue head on, aren't we kind of bringing that issue to a head? I mean, what I can see is an auditor or the state controller taking a look at that project and saying, "Oh, wait a minute, what's your authority to do that?" And then try to get the money back. Which is that's an issue that I don't think we want to raise.
Well, Bill, we built the system with state money. We constructed it, back in the day. I don't see there's any argument whatsoever that it's not part of the state plan. We designed and constructed it. What more do you need to show that it's a state plan? Now, if we need to get clarifying legislation or something, we should be proceeding on that. But there's absolutely no doubt that's part of the state plan of flood control.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So we've got that tabled, Mr. President, for further discussion.
Yeah, we ought to, Tim's right, we ought to at least decide one way or another what we're going to be doing with it.
It's always fun to have conversations with the federal government.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'll tell you, this goes back way before the current administration. This is a firm belief at the Corps of Engineers that that's not part of their system. And I don't think the change in administration is going to change their view on this whatsoever. So I think we should be proceeding assuming that that's not going to change, and what do we need to do?
Okay.
I just would like to comment that the Corps is not the totality of the federal government, and I think that there are ways that we can address this issue so people in property are safe, and we coordinate with them and they with us.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that discussion. We've noted those things, and we'll take those separately at a different time after the workshop at some point. Is there any more discussion on goal 2? Okay, Ryan, can you move on to goal number 3? So goal number 3, strategy 3.1.4 is to develop a policy for facilities affected by climate change, subsidence, and groundwater depletion. And objective 3.2, strategy 3.2.5 is to develop an independent board budget structure. So those would be our top priorities of strategies that we're not getting to, that if we did have what we needed to work on, we would. All right, objective 3.3, strategy 3.3.5 is to raise awareness of flood risk and projects in the Central Valley through media opportunities. That is the end of goal 3. So pause to see if there's any discussion for goal 3.
On the thing that Jane raised earlier about the activities report for 2020 that the staff just did, one thing that we could do is under media opportunities or raising awareness or whatever, is have a small contract to have maybe a PR person put that into kind of a brochure that we could pass around. That would be helpful, and rather than have staff work on that, we could have a contract for somebody to do that. If it fits within the priorities. Under 3.14, Michael, my understanding is that this affects the San Joaquin more than anything else. But what we're going to have in the 2022 plan is a framework based upon the new process that the climate people are coming up with in terms of taking a look at the hydrology of the San Joaquin and what that means for the lands down there. And it seems to me that the policy that we're going to be developing is going to come out after we get those results. So that's more of a long-term goal that we have to do once those folks arrive at some numbers. Give us a number to design to how much, what's the flow, excess flow coming out of that system that we're going to have to deal with. But we don't know what that is now, so that's going to come later, I would think.
Okay.
No, you're absolutely right, Mr. President. And that was the one of the drawbacks of the red entry. We're hoping to simplify. But but not all the red items are red only because we don't have resources. Some of those red items are because they require cooperation from other agencies, or someone else is taking the lead on it, or we're waiting, we're trailing on something, as you just pointed out. So that's I think an observation we could deal with an improved definition of the red items, which we'll definitely be working on.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, right. There's we need to break out these red items, Leslie. I think we're kind of coming to that conclusion. Some of them are low-hanging fruit, as Jeet would say, and we could turn to green. And the others we could say would be long-term, depending upon the results of something else. And others would be long-term because we are not being done because we don't have current resources to do it. But break it out clearly so that we can understand what they mean.
Yes, exactly. And that would, I think, help with what Board Member Countryman had noted earlier with regard to the inspections. That's another one of those where it needed to be broken out differently. So we can definitely do some refinements on those. Thank you.
Yeah. And don't forget as you're doing that, check out the regulations area too, because we got to bring the regulations along with what we're breaking out, so if they conform. Okay.
Bill, I have a question question on objective 3.2.
Yeah.
Under the record management program, digitize all historical documents and so forth, are we currently digitizing anything that's recent and starting from there? I understand it might be a huge job to go back and digitize all the historic records, but are we now creating digital database of all current approvals or documents?
That was my suggestion yesterday when I talked to the staff. Don't wait to start from the 1911 and start going forward. Stop the bleeding now and digitize everything now going forward, and work on the historic stuff when you get a chance.
Yeah, that's my comment exactly.
Yeah, no, that's what I commented to them yesterday, and I think they're considering a way to do that. And I don't know whether Catherine is actually digitizing all these reports and developing a record management system or not. But I told her to just look at what other modern state agencies are doing in terms of records management and start off now with what we're doing now and worry about the historic stuff later. And I think Leslie wrote that down yesterday, and they're going to try to implement that. The question is to make sure that you're doing it in a way that other state agencies have given a lot of thought to, and I'm sure there are agencies that have already done this in a way that we'd want to have done, I would think.
Yeah, actually, Mr. President, the CNRA, our parent agency, has an existing contract for digitizing records, and that was part of their long-term goal when they were moving the headquarters building over. They're not building any records management. Everything's going to be digitized. So I know that Catherine has been working with contract staff to hopefully make sure we're part of that effort.
Yeah. Okay. So that going forward with the current stuff will be okay. It's just the backlog of the historic stuff that we have to worry about. And if that's the case, then I think that's good. Okay. Good point, Joe. Anything else? Anybody else have anything? Okay, Michael.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. Ryan, can we move on to goal number 4, please? All right, goal number 4, strategy 4.1.3 is to develop a program to track Sigma and groundwater sustainability plans and the potential effects on our flood system. So though, again, that's the first one in red. That would be our first top priority if we had the necessary resources essentially to work on that. And that's, as far as goal 4, that's there's no other objectives. So if we want to have some more discussion on goal number 4, we can do that now, or I can move on to goal number 5.
I have a comment on 4. Okay, the designated floodway program. To say it's outdated is a vast understatement. I mean, this is going to require, some careful thought about what and how we go forward with this designated floodway program. And since it's red, I guess that means that we don't have the capability to do that at this time. Is that what that's designating?
Yeah. Correct.
Well, not exactly, though. I mean, we've been marshaling some resources to try and start on some of the data management portion of it, just to update and get in alignment with the other digital efforts that are around data management. So we have put we had some, extra money that was left over that we put into starting that effort. So we are working on it, but as you noted, it's a really big lift, and existing staff is not to do that without contract support with consultants. So we need budget for that.
Yeah, I mean, I really think we need a group to relook at this whole thing. And we don't have the resources, and we won't have the resources to redo and modernize and bring up to date those floodplains. It's a very expensive long-term thing. And I think there's other alternatives and ways to proceed that we should consider, like adopting FEMA 100-year floodplains instead of having our own floodplains and things like that. So if, when that's being considered, I would be willing to, help think it through.
Thank you. I've already put you on the list of volunteers for that work group.
Okay.
One of the things, Leslie, is Mike Mearswar is supposed to be the floodplain manager for the state, isn't he? Isn't that one of his duties?
I believe that is his new position. Yes.
Yeah, we should partner with him and try to figure this puzzle out, because
right. It seems to me one of the things that we could do is request him to convene a group to talk about that. I mean, if Joe's right and all it takes to do it is to adopt the FEMA floodplains, then that seems to me to be a reasonable solution. Mike knows more about FEMA than anybody else, so
it may not solve all, but it seems to me it could solve a lot.
Excellent point. Thank you.
The Michael, on 4.1.3 on Sigma, isn't Taryn doing that now? Isn't she tracking all of this stuff? Don't we just have to be part of what she's doing?
Yes, Mr. President. I think, as we noted before, some of the red items aren't just resourcing items there because we are not the lead for that effort. It's more of a needing to.
This would break out in a different way then?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Leslie, if you don't mind, could I chime in real quick?
Absolutely.
So for 4.1.3, Bill, DWR is tracking this. However, they're reliant on DFM and other agencies like the board to consider the impact of flood.
I can't. You're not coming through, Ruth, to me anyway.
Yeah, shoot.
Go ahead, Ruth. You're good now.
Okay. So for 4.1.3, this Taryn, the Sigma coordinator for DWR is reliant on DFM and agencies like ours to let the Sigma office know impacts from flood control facilities. So the SIGMO has to consider, impacts to water conveyance facilities and subsidence to things that aren't just flood. So from a flood perspective, that's really what this focus is on.
But why wouldn't we get these GSAs, aren't they really independent groups that are doing their own plans at this point? Wouldn't they do that? Wouldn't we require them to do that? The ones that affect the technical facilities of the flood control system?
Well, so sometimes GSAs are like joint use authorities. They're counties or LMAs that have come together based on the basin. However, we found that in reviewing the GSPs that there wasn't an emphasis or sometimes just an absence of discussion of flood facilities or impacts to flood control facilities. So I think that's what sort of our engagement with Mike Mearswau's group was, that we both recognized that and thought that if there was a way we could engage GSAs to educate them on the flood system, so they could consider those potential impacts from the projects they're proposing to the flood system.
Oh, that's what this is about? Okay.
Right.
So this is another outreach program. That's why you're involved with it.
Right.
Okay.
There's just so many aspects that go into the Sigma, right? From water conveyance and ag,
yeah.
all of it. So we're just the flood component, right? So
okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we can move on to goal 5, please, Ryan.
Yeah.
All right, goal 5 is our last goal, and that is alignment with the governor's 2020 water resilience portfolio. Ryan, can you zoom in just a little bit so we can see 5.1.8? I mentioned earlier that goal 5 is organized a bit different. We kept the strategies of goal 5 in order with the portfolio. So at the end of each strategy are the letters W with a number, and that's in parentheses. And the number indicates which action of the portfolio the strategy is tied to. So for the red strategies, if you look at 5.1.8, there's number 1 in parentheses at the beginning, and this indicates staff's top priority of red strategies that we are currently working on. 5.1.8 looks at regional flood risk in the San Joaquin River region and development of a plan to address climate change and flood risk. So the green strategies shown in goal 5 are the strategies we feel that we can or are currently working on. The red strategies are those that we don't have what we need to be able to work on those, and our first priority would be 5.1.8, and that's looking at the San Joaquin region and development of a plan. And that's really all I wanted to highlight for goal 5, and I'd open it up to discussion from the board on goal 5.
Bill, maybe, or Tim. I know Tim had to step away for a moment. Just to add on to that, though, as you two particularly have been participating with the multi-benefit initiative division at DWR on a plan they're working on, hopefully to address some of this.
Yeah, I think, Leslie, for what it's worth, I'm going to need to give this some time just to get my head around it. And I'm sure there's pros and cons to having it carved out the way that you guys did under a separate goal versus trying to point to the places where it could be integrated with the previous four. And I don't know that I've done enough thinking to try to articulate some of that. But I'm happy to talk with you guys offline and be part of that discussion.
Okay, you're hired.
This is Jane. This strategy here is something that we very specifically called out in the 17 plan update that needed to be a focus of the work of developing the next update. And so this is not just ours, and it doesn't say that it is here. From what I understand with the updates of the plan, there'll be some addressing of this, and we just have to be a partner in that whole effort. But thanks, Jen. I looked at this too and I thought, whoa, this is a whole brand new goal. Got an awful lot of strategies, and I think some of them need clarification and some work on it.
No, exactly. And as you point out, many of these things we are doing already, as noted in other places in the plan. So I can see what Board Member Ramirez is talking about as opposed to having it as a separate goal. So that would be a great point of discussion between now and I think when we bring it back to you all.
Well, what would be the point of bearing this with the other goals? Wouldn't this be better, or are you thinking that it would be received better to be integrated in the other four goals?
Well, as a place to start, I don't think I would describe it as being buried. I think it would highlight and draw out the things that are priorities, right? All these things are important, and there's a lot of red, and we can't do all of them. But to the extent that they're a priority for the administration, then I think they're going to float to the top. Just like Jane said, the San Joaquin example is in the 17 plan, and it's in the portfolio. And I think it strengthens our foundation if we can highlight the things that we have thought have been important for a long time and now are also priorities in other places. And the San Joaquin is just one example. I'm sure there's lots of I understand the significance and the importance to draw the connections so that we can make sure people know the things in the portfolio that are priorities for the flood board. Flip side of that coin is if we call them out separately, it looks like on the surface, without going into the detail, that the portfolio is a new thing and the other four goals were there before and they're not part of the portfolio, which is not true. So I think I'd like to get out and maybe talk in a small group about how that might best be done. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. I think it's just a matter of trying to make sure that we draw things out.
Well, I think one of the things, Tim, that people are going to look at is they'll want to know in our strategic plan where these resiliency plans relate. So, I mean, maybe a separate chart like this would be helpful. I don't know. But you're right. We talk about it a little bit more.
Mr. President, we had a brief opportunity to talk about this yesterday, and as I wanted to bring up, I think some of these items regarding the resiliency plan is a memo. And you say a chart, I said a comparison. There are aspects in the resiliency plan that we asked to be in there. We are working on, we consider them high priorities. So I think we need to show how we are we have and will continue to make efforts toward implementing those with the variety of partners and stakeholders that we always engage.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, if there's no more discussion on goal number 5, I will close this out with a few more words and open it up to further discussion.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay. In closing, I know that the board members have only had the draft strategic plan for a couple of days, and that's been apparent through our conversation today. And I know there's a lot to go over. We've added a lot to it. It's somewhat organized, but it sounds like we can do a better job in organizing it, especially looking at goal 5 and how we're going to tackle that. We're open to further discussion now if the board would like to continue the discussion of these strategies, or as Vice President Dolan has suggested, working groups or solicit board member participation through possible liaison groups with staff participation as well, so we can discuss possibly shifting around priorities and discuss the red items, the red strategies compared to the green strategies, and the priorities of those. So I'm looking forward to that and working with the board members to get through this, so that hopefully we can finalize this update in early 2021 and get it back to the board for adoption. That's all I really have for today. I appreciate the board members' involvement and discussion. It's been very helpful, and we definitely look forward to continuing this so we can complete this document. I'll turn it back over to President Edgar. Thank you.
And if the president would let me talk, I'd appreciate it, Mr. President. I want to go back to what Board Member Johnson suggested and request, which I think is excellent. If at this point forward, I would suggest that staff just give us a very brief indication of how you want us to give input so that this can be addressed, and then give us a realistic time frame. We always say next meeting, but the rest of this month is frankly non-productive. Sorry about that. It just is. That's the way it's been historically. So I think some kind of timeline of how you want input into whom, so that we don't end up with a reply all kind of sense that we don't know what we're doing and we can't use WhatsApp. So a focus point, maybe give one staff person, branch chief, ops chief, I can't remember all your duties, for us to direct our input for suggestions or rewording there. And I don't think we do this again, maybe in a workshop February, March, and then aim at, before we receive the plan, that we finalize this. Just a suggestion. I'm looking at realistic workflow and how we have to work these days.
Yeah, I think, we need to get this done before March. We need to get this done in January, I think, or we don't have enough time for the staff to work on their strategies for the year. Leslie, I'm gonna, without objection, just refer this matter to you and ask that you and your staff develop a process, either using liaisons or a working group or whatever you want to do to finalize this document and get it back to the board as soon as we can. I think you've gotten a lot of good input at this point. And if I know Jane is interested, as well as Mary Jane and Brian and Tim, on some of the specific aspects of the plan. And I would just think that you could use your discretion to assemble 2 or 3 board members, maybe 2 members on one subject matter, maybe take goal number 5 and make sure Tim and is on that, and somebody else if you want, and just get the major input and wordsmith the document and get it back to us. I don't think we need to spend a lot more time in that.
We can definitely do that, and I have a rough idea of who has volunteered for what on the board. So thank you very much for all of your input today. That was really helpful. I'm not sure that January is completely doable. We'll know a little bit more about the amount of work, but we will definitely put our best effort into getting this done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think the only reason I'm pushing on that is that if we let this slip, we're going to be halfway during the year, and you're not going to have any time to implement the strategies.
Right.
The whole idea is to get the strategies going, using partnerships, using other resources, using contract, whatever we have to do to get these done. But you need basically the good part of the year of 2021 to do some of this work.
Mm-hmm.
The big job to me, and if Tim's right, and we want to integrate goal number 5 into the other goals to make it look like we've been doing a lot of this already, for people that are reading this, that would be good. I would still think we'd want to have some notation on these different strategies as to which ones pertain to the resiliency plan, just so that I keep forgetting her name, the head of the resiliency plan. What's her?
Nancy Vogel.
Yeah, Nancy, so that Nancy has a list that she knows that we've looked at that. That'll be important, I think, for her to be able to do that. Anyway, maybe that's the way to address it. But Tim's point's a good one. Okay. Without objection, that's what we'll do here. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, members, we're on item 5, which is adjournment. And without objection or further comment, we'll have this meeting adjourn at 1:34. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good weekend.